Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting for September 7th, 2022. We will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum present for our Planning Commission tonight. Our first item of business is to approve minutes of the August 17th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. If everybody had a chance to review those ahead of time, do you have any?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next we have our public hearings. We do have quite a few, we have 5 public hearings tonight. And as you can see, we have a lot of people here that want to speak tonight and come in, taking time out of their evening to be here. So we will get started. Our first public hearing tonight is a zoning application for approximately 30 acres located at 1750 North Thompson Lane to be rezoned from RS15 and PSO to CM and PSO. New Vision Baptist Church is the applicant. Ms. Green, good evening.
Good evening, Mrs. Jones and Planning Commission members. Our first public hearing this evening is for an application that's been made by New Vision Baptist Church to rezone property they own that's located along North Thompson Lane, West Northfield Boulevard, and West College Street from its current RS15 zoning, residential single-family district, to CM, commercial medical district. The property is also located in a PSO, a planned signage overlay. They intend to keep the PSO on the property and will likely be coming back to you for an amendment to that based on any changes that may or may not be approved tonight regarding the base zoning. This property is located at 1750 North Thompson Lane and is developed with an institutional group assembly or a church, and a church that's been here for quite a while. It's located directly across from the battlefield, but adjacent to several commercial or office properties that are zoned mixed use district, light industrial district, and located within the Gateway Design Overlay District. This parcel itself is not located in the Gateway Design Overlay District. You can see that there appears to be a little appendage parcel separated by a street from this property, and that's excess right-of-way located here that the Planning Commission City Council studied and were able to abandon, and that property transferred to New Vision Church. Through the years, the programming for this church have changed, and they've needed to do building additions or modifications to accommodate the change in their program. And when they make those changes, because it's zoned for a single-family residential use, they're required to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals to either obtain or amend a special use permit specifying the changes. They've recently have been working on a building addition, and with that building addition, it's a 2-story addition with the highest point being 45 feet. In the current zone, that building cannot exceed 35 feet as the maximum height, and so Mr. Blomley advised the applicants to consider seeking a zoning change for the property to a zone that would allow this as a use by right, so that the technical review process would be implemented, so review of plats and plans and drainage and building elevations, but there wouldn't be the extra step needed of going before the Board of Zoning Appeals. Mr. Blomley suggested commercial medical as the commercial use because it's, of the options, was the most restrictive use that also allowed what they want to do by right. So the CM district varies, of course, from single family because it allows medical uses, medical offices, and the type of offices are generally restricted only to medical. You can't have like a real estate office in this district, but it also allows institutional group assemblies by right. The CM district has a maximum height of 60 feet, whereas the RS15 has 35, and that's the biggest driver here. The setbacks are somewhat different, but the setbacks are typically not an issue here because it has no contiguous property with any residential property, so there's no impact to where people live. This property is impacted by our city's major transportation plan in a couple ways, and the map's a little bit small, but you can see that there's a portion of West Northfield Boulevard that was built already by the city, and actually the applicant participated in those improvements by way of dedicating the necessary right-of-way to line that road up there. Eventually, West Northfield Boulevard will connect across across the river and cross the railroad tracks. At this time, it doesn't. And also, there are some improvements proposed for West College Street to be improved to a 3-lane roadway. So that's a midterm improvement. It's identified as MTI 13. Let me go back to my map. The future land use map does recommend, the recommendations on the future land use map are that this property be public institutional, and the rezoning is consistent with the future land use map. So when the Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing on this application, staff would like you to consider the information they've provided and consider that it is consistent with our future land use map recommendations as well. If you have any questions either before or after the public hearing, I'll be glad to answer those.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Green before we open the public hearing? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Green. Okay, we will open our first public hearing tonight. I'll go ahead and tell you about our public hearings. For the public hearing you're here to speak for, when that comes up, you come forward to the podium, state your name and your address, and then you will have 3 minutes to make your comments to the Planning Commission. We do ask that when you're making your comments, you make all your comments to the Planning Commission, not to other members of the audience and or the developers and any other of the teams in place. And we take note of any questions that you ask along the way, and we will do our best to answer those questions at the end of the public hearing. So we do not give immediate answers as you talk. We'll make note of all the questions and then discuss all those at the end of the public hearings. So this will be just if you are here regarding the New Vision Baptist Church application, then please come forward, state your name and address, and give us your comments. We'll open the public hearing. Saving up. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you. Makes that quick and easy on our first one. So what other questions or comments do we have from the Planning Commission regarding this application?
If there are none, I'll make a motion that we approve subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion in lots of seconds. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Our next item is a zoning application for approximately 22 acres located at 1925 and 1927 Memorial Boulevard to be rezoned from RS-15 to PUD. That's 5.4 of the acres, and to amend the Adams Place PUD, 16.6 acres. Adams Place LLC is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you again. Our second public hearing this evening is for you to consider a zoning change request being made by Adams Place LLC, who, as you know, or has been known as NHC. They currently own some property located along Memorial Boulevard and Haynes Haven Lane, and the property is identified on the map that we have available to you. The property is currently zoned 2 different zoning districts. One is PUD, and that's in the blue area on the map. That's Planned Unit District, and it was zoned such in 1995. And then a portion of the property is zoned RS-15, and that's the area shown green on the map before you. And the RS-15 is single-family residential district, and it has a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. This property is across from Walmart and some commercial outparcels. To the north is a grocery store. And of course, the city's airport is is just behind the Walmart to the east. To the south and to the west are the Haynes Haven residential subdivision. And then, as I mentioned, to the north, there are some commercial properties. The Haynes Haven subdivision is zoned RS-15, single-family residential district, and those lots shown in green are actually 5 separate lots of record, still shown on a plat as being 5 lots. The applicants, if they move forward, will will do a combination plat to combine the plats, even though they're not showing up like that today. National Health Corps, NHC, owns the property and currently operates an 89 apartment residential unit and a 23-room memory care center and a 90-bed healthcare center with nursing and rehabilitation. I mentioned that an application to approve the zoning was approved in 1995. Initially, this property was zoned multifamily, commercial highway, and the RS-15 lots that we see today. In 1994, when it was initially zoned PUD, the approval was for 40 nursing beds, 84 assisted living units, 60 nursing home beds, 90 independent units in a phase 3, and then another 90 independent units in a phase 4. And there were 59 parking spaces with 2 access drives. And there were restrictions on the use of the access drive to Haynes Haven Drive. When the PUD was approved in 1995, there were 6 additional conditions that were placed on it. And they were that the 5 residential lots fronting along Haynes Haven Lane be zoned RS15, and they are. Allow 1 access road onto Lot 3 from Haynes Haven Lane to this development, and that road be gated, and only residents with cards will have access. That meant no staff could have access to Haynes Haven Lane. The third was that a traffic light be installed at the major entrance to this development, and of course, across from Airport Road, there is a traffic signal now. The landscaping and buffering shown with the plan had to be installed in the initial phases. The service entrance off Memorial Boulevard would be used for all service vehicles and construction vehicles, limiting any construction or service access from Haynes Haven Lane, and that no more than 25 parking spaces could be located on Lot 4 if the Phase 4 of the project was developed, which it never was. In 1999, that PUD was later amended, and that amendment was specific to the access to the gated drive to Haynes Haven Lane. And I wasn't here for these, but I did read the minutes, include them in your materials. There was some malfunctioning of the gate, and then I think that the gate was unlocked, and so planning staff initiated an application to loosen the restrictions of that gate to Haynes Haven to allow family members to also have access, and that was approved. I think initially they were going to take all the restrictions away, but then there was a compromise. And then in 1999, there was a third amendment, and that amendment was to allow the a 4,888 square foot administrative office, which was really an accessory building, and it didn't change the programming of the campus. So what you have before you today is an amendment 2020. It's been a long time, since 1995, where they would like to expand the limits of the campus within that RS15 property. That would require amending the PUD as it currently is approved, and then rezoning those RS15 properties from single family to PUD. The amendment would allow an additional 53 units to be on this property. Some of those units are in an apartment-style building, and the other units, 8 of them, are in some 2-story structures that are reminiscent of townhomes, although they are not townhomes. Those 2-story structures have 15 of the units, and then the remaining are in the multifamily structures. The streetscape along Haynes Haven Lane would change with approval of this PUD. One of the requests that they have is a 50% reduction in the front setback to Haynes Haven Lane. So currently, their plan shows them coming in halfway in that front setback, but they're proposing a 3-foot berm to be along Haynes Haven to offset the impacts of having that structure closer to the street. There are no plans to add an additional signal to Haynes Haven Lane, as there is already one across from Airport Road into the main entrance of the campus. There would not be enough distance between Haynes Haven Lane and Airport Road to have a second signal, particularly on a street that is regulated by the State of Tennessee Department of Transportation. When a plan development is submitted, they are tasked with reviewing the city's development regulations and standards and comparing the plan to those standards and identify any exceptions that they may need. As I mentioned, one of those exceptions is to reduce the setback along Haynes Haven Lane from 40 feet to 20 feet. That's one of the exceptions being requested. And another is to reduce the the minimum parking required for these. Since they're not traditional like apartments, they're proposing to reduce the parking from 1.5 spaces to one space per bedroom. And then they'd also like to increase the height of the building, so they would increase it by 6 feet 6 inches. I also thought it was important for the Planning Commission to know what exceptions to the terms and provisions that were originally a part of the plan they'd be requesting with this. One of those, of course, there was a restriction and provision that the 5 residential lots fronting along Haynes Haven not be developed, and of course this plan does include developing those, so that would be an amendment to that. And then modifying the landscaping and buffering as shown on the original PUD plan, because these buildings would go within that existing landscape area. There was the requirement that no more than 25 spaces be on Lot 4, and of course, with the development of this, they would want an exception to that requirement. The future land use map identifies this area as multifamily residential, so the 53 residential dwelling units is consistent with the future land use map, and that's what's on the screen now. So the Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing prior to making a recommendation to City Council. Planning staff asked that you consider the PUD plan as submitted and any deviations that go along with it, and then also consider that the PUD zoning amendment and rezoning is consistent with the future land use map. The applicants have a presentation they'd like to share with you, but before they come up, do you have any questions from me?
Any questions for Ms. Green?
So I've got one. And you said it earlier, but if you don't mind reminding me, so what is what rights are available to this gate today? Who can go through it today?
Sure. I can be more specific. Let's see.
I went through it at like 1 o'clock.
Oh, you did?
On May 11, 2000, the City Council amended the condition to change it so that only residents with cards and additional care or family members can have cards. So no employees, but the residents or caregivers. Initially, it was residents only.
Well, I guess we'll find out from the applicant if that's still the case, if that's how it's being used today, so.
Margaret Ann, can you clarify on the RS-15 portion, the original agreement from the 1994, 1999 approval was that this would not be developed, right?
The original plan was that it not be developed.
With anything?
Right.
Okay.
Landscaping, it would have.
The
it would
landscape
have,
berm, yeah.
And then a few parking spaces and an access drive, because an access drive does go through it.
Yes.
Any other questions before we hear from the developer? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Green.
You're welcome.
Mr. Roundtree?
Chairman Jones, Planning Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'd like to thank Margaret Ann for her presentation and introducing this project to you, and I'm happy to introduce you to Adams Place. Most of you are familiar with this, and I'm also accompanied by Keaton Pettit from Johnson Bailey Architects, so he will be representing the architecture in detail. If you have detailed questions, we also have representation from NHC leadership as well as Adams Place leadership. So if you have questions, we're here to answer those questions as we move through. I would just like to move through the presentation fairly quickly because I know we have a lot of feedback that's going to be coming. As far as existing conditions, most people are familiar with Adams Place. Haynes Haven Road is a large road that borders Adams Place, and the piece of property that the primary development's occurring is a large kind of pastoral area that's kind of shown in the bottom slides. At the end of that pastoral area, there's a kind of a rolling berm section with mature landscaping. So that's primarily where the construction is going to take place, where the bottom slides are. As far as the townhomes, if you look at item J, that's the location where the townhome units are, the two-story units, where there'll be 8 of those. That is the proposed location for the townhomes. Adjacent relationships, Haynes Haven Lane is pretty much ranch-style homes along that frontage. And just for clarification, it was brought up, are the RS-15 lots never to be developed? It's our understanding that they weren't to be developed for anything other than RS-15. So those could be single-family homes. We're asking for that restriction to be removed so we can continue on with the active living homes, apartments. The overall master plan is shown here. So as far as, I don't think we have any way to show, okay, so really the area of the large pasture, if you can see my cursor, is really this area here, which is basically, as Margaret Ann mentioned, on the south easterly corner of the property. There's 3 large apartment buildings that we were proposing. They're 3-story units. Keaton can get into the details related to the architecture. They're designed in a C shape, and that's for a reason, because we wanted to protect the look of Adams Place from the public right-of-way along Memorial, as well as along Haynes, as well as along the entrance. So all the internal operations for these facilities would be internal. The parking, the bottom floor of these units have garages, so that would be an option as well, to have garage parking, as well as all the parking spaces would be covered spaces. Those units and their orientation allow for a strong presentation from Memorial, a strong presentation from Haynes Haven, and from the main entrance, and try to leave as much of the existing landscaping along Memorial as well as the main entrance as undisturbed as possible. We don't plan on disturbing any of that. The pressure point right at this point is along Haynes Haven Lane. That is where we feel a little bit more pinch point, and that landscaping is mature. There's berming there. We'd like to keep all that intact. However, we are fully aware that if it's disturbed, our goal is to, put it back to some level of maturity that it does provide protection from the folks on Haynes Haven Lane. As was mentioned, the main entrance still stays, the main entrance off of Memorial. This is the entrance that's at question off of Haynes Haven Lane. That's that gate that has been spoken about. The objective with this approval will be to close that and make that a limited access gate that'll be only controlled for residents or folks who have access cards to go through the gate. So that will be something that I know folks on Haynes Haven do not want any more additional traffic. That would prohibit these folks from wanting to go out on Haynes Haven and exit the property that way. The logical progression for them will be to go out to the main entrance, go out to Memorial where there's a traffic light. It's not the easiest turn in the world to go left off of Haynes Haven Lane onto Memorial. So we want to make sure our residents are encouraged to use the traffic light. As far as the townhomes are concerned, they're on the southern portion of the property, and they go all the way back to the rear property line. Those will be basically more residential style. The buildings are independent living, basically age restricted 55 and up. The townhomes have the same criteria, but they're just going to be a little bit more towards the active living. The cars will have, those homes will have garages as well. They'll have courtyards. They'll be 2-story in nature and look a little bit more residential scale. These 3 buildings are existing covered parking that are there. That is to remain. Those spaces are used by current residents. And right here is another green space currently that's basically underutilized. We know that by disturbing this green space, we're proposing various nodes, little patio areas. We're proposing internally a dog park area, a mail kiosk. So there is green space internal to the apartment buildings, but we know there is a lot of green space that's being lost in this location. But that's basically a pass-through. So we know that we're changing the view and the look, but at the same time, there's really no programming. By bringing in this green space, we're hoping to offset some of the green space loss by bringing it into what is a new amenity building. This has been exciting for us to think about because this is something that doesn't exist for the current Adams Place residents now. Right there, this large appendage that comes off the back of the building, that is a existing enclosed pool area. This is a new building that would be utilized by the whole community that could increase the programming opportunities, therapy opportunities, recreational opportunities, all kinds of different things could be incorporated with this new structure. But it also would encapsulate that green space with landscaping, and we'd have opportunities for walkways. So the whole campus, and this was a challenge by the staff, which we appreciate, is that we really want to make the whole campus much more walkable. So this is a list of all the amenity improvements. The indoor pool, we would like to add indoor-outdoor doors that open up the pool to the amenity area. We would like to add an arbor structure in the amenity area. We would add walking paths, various patios, the dog park are all part of the amenity package. But the main focal point is the new building as well as the green space associated with it. And this next, Keaton will walk you through the Amenity Center itself, but it would provide fitness centers, art studio, lawn events, arbor with grilling stations, passive seating areas, as well as a covered porch. We feel like that could be a great add to the community. This represents all the new networking of sidewalks that currently are not there. We want to make sure that independent living folks have the ability to get to the Amenity Center as well as just connecting to the existing sidewalk system for the current residents if they want to walk around the property. We want to make sure there's good connectivity within the property. The last concern is making sure that we don't lose the character of Adams Place. Keaton will talk about the architectural components, which we feel like are a little bit more residential in nature, but really bring a lot of elements from the existing building into the new architecture. But we want to make sure that there's not a drop-off in the character landscape-wise. So we anticipate, enhancing the front entrance access point along that main drive. We're really not looking at touching this area at all, but if there's any kind of encroachment on that, going back and replace that with mature trees, and then going back and reestablishing any disruption along the berm and landscape along Hayneshaven Lane, as well as adding foundation planting around all the buildings, landscaping the courtyards, landscaping the green space, the amenity area, and really giving it that lush character that Adams Place is known for. Parking, we're asking for a parking exception. The campus is overparked currently. However, some of the distribution of that parking is not in close proximity to the new construction. So we went ahead and basically isolated the parking that we're going to plan on using for the new construction, as well as where we're counting on some of the existing parking to be counted towards our parking requirements with the new buildings. Handicap accessibility is still important. Dumpster locations, this basically shows where the dumpster locations will be, shows the existing campus in yellow, shows the new facilities in orange. So that gives you kind of a diagrammatic overview of the new construction. Margaret Ann has gone through all the different exceptions we're asking for, but before we get into that, let's get Keaton up here to talk about the architecture.
Thanks, Clyde. I'm Keaton Pettit with Johnson & Bailey Architects. We've been fortunate to work on all the buildings on the Adams Place campus, and we're pretty proud of the legacy that is already established there. When we were tasked with developing a design for this new development, we had really three primary goals, which were to be respectful to the existing campus architecture, to be respectful to the residences on Hayneshaven, and also to provide a distinct architectural language to this new style of senior living at Adams Place. In our efforts to be respectful to the existing architecture, we've attempted to use a consistent use of materials. We're proposing to use the same red brick that's already on campus on all the buildings, use the same stone accent material, use the same shingle roofing material that's already there. We also are proposing to continue using the same architectural elements that can be found on campus, predominantly the round arch motif found on many of the window openings and door openings at Adams Place currently, and stone accent and banding elements, and also incorporating the gas lamp style decorative light fixtures, which are consistent with the prominent entry gate to Adams Place. And we've even tried to continue a similar level of articulation on the cornice lines of the new proposed structures. With regards to attempting to be respectful to the Hayneshaven residences, we've tried to take the existing architecture of Adams Place and provide a more residential flavor to that, so it's not as intrusive on the Hayneshaven residences, and it fits more in with the residential feel of that neighborhood. And we've attempted to do that by introducing a new material to our palette, which is this board and batten siding. And we've limited it to only a handful of areas so that we can maintain a similar consistent look with the existing campus, but we feel that it brings a much more residential feel to these new buildings. We've included a high level of roofline variation, and we've also we worked hard to position all the townhome style units closer to the Hayneshaven residences, because those are 1- and 2-story in nature and fit in character-wise. And then as far as a distinct character, again, we introduced a new material with the board and batten siding, and we've added prominent arched entry elements at the 3-story apartment style building units. And And we've also introduced a higher level of brick detailing around window and door openings, just to give it a little different character from the existing campus. I'm going to walk through each building type for you. So these would be the typical townhome style residences. And as you can see, they're a combination of 1 and 2 story structures. The bottom elevation on this page shows what would be seen from Haynes Haven. We've positioned the 1-story units closer to Haynes Haven so that, and then it steps up to 2 stories as it steps back, so that where we have asked for a reduction in the setback, the building that is in that setback, that typical setback, is just a 1-story building. So the berm and landscape buffer would help really hide that new construction. This would be the typical 3-story apartment style buildings. These would have 15 units each, living units each, with 7 garages. We've developed really both major facades of this structure to read as a front, because each structure faces a major thoroughfare, be it Memorial, Haynes Haven, or the entry gate at Adams Place. We wanted it to have a really nice character. And we've been through several design iterations over the last 9 months, really, and this started out with a bit more contemporary feel when we proposed initial designs, but we realized that in a way we wanted to be more respectful to the existing campus architecture, and so we started to dial back the language to a point where we felt it really fit in well, but we had two colors of brick. One was a light brick, one was the brick that is already on campus. And when we held our neighborhood meeting, we got a lot of feedback about the architecture and how it didn't look like Adams Place. And we felt that one way to really make it feel like Adams Place was to eliminate that second color of brick. So now the only color of brick is the red brick that's already on campus. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm going to just make one comment at this point. Just looking at that last elevation we were looking at on the single-family attached on the Haynes Haven elevation side.
Let's see.
So that bottom.
Yes.
I didn't know if it, I would think that side would almost mimic or look like what would be the front side to Adams Place, so that the side you're looking at from Haynes Haven also looks like the front of a house and not the back of a house.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that, most everything on Haynes Haven is brick, I believe. And I would think there needs to be a lot more brick on that back side, on the Haynes Haven side. Just initial comment looking at that.
Sure.
I'm sure we're going to hear a lot here in a minute from everybody, and I'm sorry, I just noticed that when you were going through the presentation and wanted to go ahead and at least point that out, because I know some residents may also feel the same way.
We understand that you would typically want that to look like the front of a house, in an effort to make these work on the site and not really get into that setback. The orientation of the building resulted in basically the side of the building facing Haynes Haven, but we did try to add more articulation with more windows than you would typically have on the side of a house, and to try to dress it up some. But we definitely understand your comment about the lack of brick.
And just like some, like out in the gateway, we often have to have 4-sided architecture, where all 4 sides of the building have to look like you're seeing them from the front. I just feel like maybe this needs 2-sided. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of tweaking. Other questions or comments before we open the public hearing?
I've got, Clyde, can you come back up here? So I think my question hopefully will give some clarification, and probably needs to be said in the beginning and not in the end. So am I understanding you to say, with respects to the use of the gate on Haynes Haven, that what you are proposing is that only the residents that are in the current footprint are going to be able to use that gate? Or are you saying the residents that are in the current footprint plus the residents of the proposed plan would have the use of that gated entrance?
It is my understanding that all the new residents would have access to the gate as well as all the existing residents. We just want to control access from anyone who's not associated with the facility by using that as a potential cut through. Also, really, the gate would probably discourage movement from inside the facility onto Haynes Haven Lane unless there's a reason for them to go west. Obviously, the safest connection to Memorial is the main entrance with the lights. So it's kind of a twofold. I think it'll encourage activity towards the main entrance, but it'll also discourage any sort of cut-through traffic and limit the amount of traffic that would want to migrate onto Haynes Haven Lane.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Roundtree before we open the public hearing?
I guess one question would be, as it relates to the gate today, it's supposed to be functioning how?
I'm not an authority on the gate. Is there anyone from Adams Place that could give a little bit more clarity on? Terry will. Thank you, Terry. Sorry, Warren.
Good evening. I'm Terry Deal, the Executive Director with Adams Place Residential Living. I am unable to give you a history of the gate. I can tell you the way the gate has operated in the 4 years I have been on campus. It is a pressure-sensitive gate at this point, meaning anyone that pulls up to the gate and waits for a second comes in or out. So it is used by both Adams Place residents, Adams Place personnel, and the Haynes Haven community.
Okay. I drove it, and that's exactly how it worked. But
Yes,
that's
sir.
not how I heard Margaret Ann said it was.
Originally, it was the card. That was back in the day before I was even in Murfreesboro, but the way I understand it, it did have a card that residents were issued, and that was how it was activated. I can't tell you the history of what has happened over the years, but that is the way it is operational today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions for Ms. Steele? Okay,
All right.
thank you. Okay, so we are going to open the public hearing for this, and I'll remind everyone that you will come to the podium, state your name and your address. You will have 3 minutes to speak. You do also only get to come forward one time. So once you've done your 3 minutes speaking, and yes, you can get in line because we'll have quite a few wanting to speak. But please, again, remember to make all your comments to the Planning Commission. Also, please ask that you refrain from clapping, cheering, grumbling, moaning, any of those extra things in regards to the comments that are being made, so that we can make sure that everybody has a chance to speak tonight. So with that, we will open the public hearing, and our first guest is up here ready to speak.
Thank you. We're right here front and center ready.
Absolutely.
I'm Charlotte Gardner. I own an apartment at Adams Place Independent Living, 1925 Memorial Boulevard. And there were 70%, over 70% of our residents signed a petition originally against this new development. Not all that 70% is here tonight, but the ones that are here, will you please stand up or raise your hand? They've asked me to read the following statement.
Okay.
We, the residents of Adams Place Independent Living, strongly object to the rezoning of 1925, 1927 Memorial Boulevard properties. Our objections are based on the following problems related to the proposed development. 1, proposed construction of 53 family units plus an amenity center building on the green space now comprising the Adams Place campus will double the existing independent living population and add 75 to 100 more cars, which will more than double the number of vehicles. This is an already densely populated and highly trafficked area, frequently used by emergency vehicles, such as fire trucks and ambulances, all to the detriment of current campus residents as well as the public users. Memorial Boulevard is, as we know, a major artery with very heavy traffic and quite often seriously congested traffic that impedes routine as well as emergency vehicles, produces loud road noise, and increasingly results in higher levels of air pollution. In addition, the primary entrance to Adams Place campus is located directly across from the entrances to Walmart and Murfreesboro Municipal Airport. The campus' second access is located on Haynes Haven Lane, a highly used Memorial Boulevard and West Northfield Boulevard connector that serves both Adams Place residents as well as the residents of the larger, well-established neighborhood of Haynes Haven. The boulevard and connector also have traffic associated with 2 schools that are in the area, with buses and parents' cars often backed up along these connector streets. The green space currently around the existing campus buildings is essential to combat the heavy traffic noise from Memorial Boulevard, and the campus trees and other vegetation are essential to counteract the negative impact of air pollution. Destroying these would have a significant detrimental impact on the quality of life of residents. In fact, in this proposal, if it goes through, the only major green space in the area will be lost, not only to the campus, but to the larger neighborhood of which it is a part. It is actually a pocket park that the city doesn't even have to maintain. Residents also have very serious infrastructure concerns. Major among these is increased potential for flooding created with proposed increased density. The campus already has experienced at least one flooding episode, which required residents to be housed in the hotel or stay with family members until the problem was solved. With the increased destruction of green space and increased runoff that results with more buildings and asphalt and concrete paving for access, parking, clubhouse hardscape, the potential for flooding and water drainage problems is increased. Adams Place residents are not aware of the completion of the impact study, and I understand it has been done. We would like to have a copy. In summary, using green space to add proposed apartments and townhouses would result in introducing into an already highly congested area even more air pollution, noise pollution, traffic congestion, and additional infrastructure problems. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. So good to see you. Thank you.
You. I have copies of this and the petition I will leave.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Wood. I live at 107 Haynes Haven Lane. What has happened over the last 32 years? Memorial Highway used to be a 2-lane highway when I built my home. Now it's a 5-lane highway, and that 5-lane highway is crying out to this panel to make turning lanes. Traffic spills out from Chick-fil-A and from Andy's Ice Cream and others. That's just a side note. As we get into the rezoning attempts that have occurred in my neighborhood, 32 years ago, a daycare center wanted to go in behind SunTrust, what is now Truist Bank on Memorial and Love Court. That was unanimously denied by the planning department. Across the street is another vacant lot at Memorial and Love Court. That applicant wanted to place office space there. That was unanimously denied under the late Doug Young's committee. A year later, he came back with another rezoning attempt. That attempt was also unanimously denied under Bob Lamb, who is now retired. Kathy Jones, you were a part of his committee. And I remember you saying that you didn't like a 2-story structure that looked like a box and not a home, and you didn't like 29 parking spaces. As we moved down Love Court and we go to James Drive, there was an applicant that wanted a photography studio. That photography studio was unanimously denied by the planning department. As we move around to Haynes Haven, NHC wanted to rezone 3 different zoning classifications into PUD, and they pushed hard to get those 5 RS-15 lots rezoned to PUD. The sitting city council of that time, in their wisdom, chose not to rezone those 5 RS-15 lots and left them unzoned, and they gave a reason. They said the Haynes Haven residents aren't comfortable with it. But they appropriately did rezone the RM-12 and Commercial Highway to PUD, which has allowed Adams Place to come into existence, and that's been a benefit and a blessing to Murfreesboro because it's an asset. What did the NHC representatives say back 28 years ago? They said if we do build out these lots on either side of our entrance on lot number 3, we'll simply put a RS-15 residential home, but we will face it inward. A different concept, but it would face in toward their campus. When we look at what's being proposed, 2-story and 3-story buildings, they can't even squeeze it in with a 40-foot setback line. They're asking for a 20-foot setback line. So I'm respectfully asking you to deny the rezoning request. And I've brought some friends that you know, friends that are your former colleagues, friends that sit in the seats that you're currently sitting in. How did Mayor Joe B. Jackson vote? 28 years ago, he said no to rezoning these lots. What did John Pittard say? John Pittard said he voted no to rezone these lots. What did Jack Ross say? Jack Ross said no to rezoning these lots. And even though he didn't participate in the NHC, but he did participate in the Memorial and Love Court, Doug Young said no to rezoning similar lots. These men were men of honor and men of integrity, and I hope that you follow in their footsteps. And I would like to thank you, Kathy Jones, and your panel for the service that you're doing to Murfreesboro and for the service that we remember that these men did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I may, I have ordinances from 28 years ago to give you.
You should come forward.
Good job. My name's Kenneth Brooks. I live at 107 Love Court. I've lived there for 37 years. In 1995, I was 52 years old, and I was here. And the planning commission that was here that night had a vision that we needed those 5 lots to be zoned, continue to stay RS-15 as a buffer zone for our community there. And they voted looking ahead, I think, because at the time, probably it wasn't so necessary. But with everything we've heard tonight, they did a heck of a good job when they made that decision to keep those lots RS-15. And I'm 80 years old now, and I've lived there, like I say, for 37 years, and I've watched Memorial Boulevard. Well, I'll say this, when we talk about turning left off of Love Court, no traffic light, you're taking your life in your own hands. So I think that you represent the people that were here 28 years ago,
and you will look ahead and you'll say, we see also why y'all did that. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Who's next?
My name is John Bickford. I live on 115 Love Court. Been there going on 6 years now. I was in the military, went in the military in 72 and came back in 2016. And I've really noticed a lot of differences. The memorial is one of the biggest issues that I have. Even though I lived there, I didn't realize the traffic was as bad because we were living in Birmingham at the time. I've got a father that's had an accident on that road, same place he was talking about. We see accidents daily. I mean, it's one of the dangerous roads in Murfreesboro as far as I'm concerned. And I think that adding more traffic to it, is just detrimental to, the people that's living in this area. We've got all the big, large three-story hotel or apartments down towards the end of the Memorial Boulevard that's having impacts when you go out towards Las Casas, or not Las Casas, but Lebanon, with all the residential structures being put up. It's just multiplying. So I feel like, you making a decision to disapprove this would be a very benefit for all of the Murfreesboro, and particularly the people in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Bickford.
Good evening. My name is Orville Mann. I live at 323 Haynes Haven Lane. I retired from the Army in 2005. Came here with my wife and our kids to settle down to a nice, quiet community, which it's been. But I will tell you, when we were talking about the gate earlier, I've had a lot of people tell me that you just cut through there if you want to get to the light. And if that has been allowed up to now, I don't understand how that's going to be regulated at this point. But that's your concern, not mine, but that's just a thought for you. But we've had my neighbor, Dr. Clark, immediate neighbor to my left. We finally got speed bumps in there because of that traffic that we're talking about and the congestion that we've had. So we finally got speed bumps in there after her house was hit 2 or 3 times. My mailbox was destroyed because people were coming around that corner just past Northfield Elementary going too fast and would go into the yards. Safety concerns, that's what I'm really talking about here. Now, we've decreased that thanks to Dr. Clark and petitioning for additional safety measures. But I can just tell you that traffic in there, if you can just imagine 100 cars trying to get out on a memorial at a light, let's say it's rush hour or morning traffic or whatever the case may be, that congestion on that road is gonna overwhelm Memorial across from that Walmart, turning left or right. So the natural thing is going to be going out Haynes Haven Lane again. And you can get down through James Street, or if you can go down to Peacock and go into where the apartments are, Saddlebrook Apartments. And that's what people are doing now already. So I'm asking you to please consider the residents in the area and the safety concerns. We have a lot of kids. My grandkids play out there. And so it's a safety concern. It's also, we like our quiet, and we want to keep it that way if possible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr.
Do you have any
Mann.
questions?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Clark. I live at 327 Haynes Haven Lane. I've been there many years. I live near Northfield Elementary School, in the curve behind Northfield Elementary School. So I see a lot of the traffic, parents lined up in their cars, kids walking, to and from school, and we are a walking neighborhood. We have a lot of kids and families and dogs and strollers, skateboards, bicycles coming and going. As Jack is my neighbor, so my house is the one that's been hit twice, actually. So I did apply for traffic calming measures in that curve. My house was hit in 2020, just as COVID hit. at 10:30 in the morning, right? So I did make the application and worked with Mayor McFarland and the city engineering department to try to get traffic calming devices installed. And they went in this January. So that's certainly a help. What that speaks to is we have speeding issues, we have traffic issues, and I'm very concerned. We are a school zone, and so I'm very concerned about the fact that we already have people that are cutting through, going fast, almost like a racetrack down through there, and we're just going to add to it. And like someone else said, if you're turning into Haynes Haven from across from Sonic, you are risking your life. I actually avoid that area many times of the day when I come in from MTSU. So I strongly oppose the rezoning measure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Commission members, for being here tonight. My name is Martha Tina Whitfield. I live at 206 Haynes Haven Lane, 4 houses down from the RS-15 lots that are on Haynes Haven Lane that are being asked to be rezoned, which I strongly oppose. My husband, Don, is here tonight, and he's going to speak on issues that we both are concerned about. I have to leave and go to choir practice, so I'm just going to speak to a couple of things that he's not going to address. One of them is the gate. As you had heard, I think as you heard Margaret Ann Green say, that gate was supposed to be locked and residents only using that. And as you heard the current director say, it is pressure sensitive, so anyone can come and go. Despite what Mr. Roundtree said, if I'm a resident in this new community that's being proposed and I want to turn right on Memorial, no way am I going to go use the light. I'm going to go through that Haynes Haven gate and turn right. It's just easier, faster, and if I have the right to do that as a resident of Adams Place, that's what I'm going to choose to do. There is, as you've heard and you will hear, so much traffic already, and I think this is dangerous. It's not what I want in my neighborhood. The other thing I'd like to say is that my husband and I have taken, we love the campus. It's beautiful at Adams Place. We may be future residents of Adams Place, depending on how this all works out. But we love the beautiful campus. That berm has been developed beautifully with magnolias and pines, and you can't have your berm and eat it too. I'm sorry, Adams Place, you just can't. So 3-foot berm, this is 3 feet. Think about that. The berm that's there now is lovely and beautiful, and if you take a tape measure 20 feet from the street, it doesn't even reach the existing berm. That's where the back of those townhomes is going to be, or the side. So I strongly oppose the rezoning, and I ask you to respectfully deny the rezoning request. Thank you, and I have to go to choir. So,
thank you, Ms. Whitfield.
Well, my name's Don Whitfield, and I did not know I was going to follow my wife because she spoke eloquently, as did our neighbors. She said we live at 206 Haynes Haven Lane. We've been there since August of 1988, so 34 years. We love our neighborhood. We've raised our children there. As she said, we strongly oppose this rezoning request. We did go down there with a tape measure and measured 20 feet, and just like she said, 20 feet isn't very much. And frankly, we find it unconscionable to think about reducing the setback from 40 feet to 20 feet. It's inconsistent with the neighborhood. Drive down the street. I doubt very seriously if you find a house 40 feet from the street, but I suppose that's the law, but I don't think you'll find that. 20 feet is nothing, and I think, as has been said earlier, previous commissions were thoughtful in keeping those lots as RS-15, and the notion that with all that space, that has to be compromised for any expansion doesn't make a lot of sense to us. We have other issues. Certainly traffic has been addressed a lot, and all those comments are very valid. And we're just really saddened by the thought of all of the green space that's going to be destroyed. And I've heard the comments from representatives of Adams Place, and as my wife said so well, you can't have your berm and eat it too. We oppose the plan, and we respectfully request that the members of the commission vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield.
Good evening. I'm Gail Hendricks. I live at 103 Haynes Haven Lane. My house would face that 3-story apartment building that's being proposed, so obviously I'm objecting to this. And I'm going to try not to be repetitious with all the other complaints, but I do have a major concern about the traffic and that entrance, especially since I live there at that entrance. You may not know this, but that entrance to Haynes Haven Lane, to my knowledge, has been hit at least 4 times by cars because people coming off Memorial quickly turning into that, because it was mentioned it's a wide street, and so people take advantage of that at a high rate of speed. There have been 3 times that entrance has been totally destroyed. It was owned by the city, and eventually they got tired of replacing it, or well, at the last one, they just absolutely refused. They said, we're just going to level it. And we said, no, we need something there to slow traffic down. So the neighborhood has taken over that entrance in repairing it and maintaining it. So I wanted to mention that as another traffic concern. Also, it is turned into a major thoroughfare with people trying to avoid that the intersection at Memorial and Northfield. People don't want to go there because they have to sit in lights, so they'll turn around and go through Haynes Haven and down James. And that particular intersection on our street is also a bus stop for the high school students. I know there's others in the neighborhood, but it's an extremely busy area. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks.
Hello, my name is Ellen Scudder, and I live at 403 Peacock Avenue, which is on the corner of Peacock and Haynes Haven. We are 4 houses down from Northfield School, so we get the mama and the daddy traffic, taking and picking up their children from school. My main concern, of course, is the traffic. I've had my holly tree hit. The car didn't make it, but my holly tree did. And we also had an incident to where a young man was he was driving away from the police and ended up in my front yard and had to be towed out of my front yard. So needless to say, on my corner, I have the apartment houses to my left, and then now we're having to deal with the expansion of Adams Place. This is very concerning to us because of the traffic. We are a neighborhood. It's called Haynes Haven for a reason. We have a haven here. I've had more people call and try to get me to sell our house to them because of where we are located. And we are known to have a nice, quiet neighborhood. We have worked very, very hard to keep our property up. We have improved our property, and we want to keep our property value the way it is. We appreciate what Adams Place has done because it does have a facility that is very nice. My own mother stayed there for a while, thoroughly enjoyed it, but now they want to build apartment houses. We already have apartment houses in our neighborhood. I don't think we need any more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Scudder.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to listen to all of our concerns. I am Krista Warren. I live at 307 Kevin Drive and have been a resident in Haynes Haven. We've actually owned 2 homes since 2002. One reason why you hear a lot of homeowners coming forward is we don't have an HOA. So when things happen in our neighborhood, we have to rally together. Gail Hendricks, who spoke earlier, she and I always rally the neighborhood together to replace whatever has been hit up front on Memorial Boulevard. I know a lot of concerns have been expressed tonight. I wanted just to bring a little bit more attention about specifically Northfield Elementary School. I do find it interesting in all of the renderings that is not in any of the in the drawings. So the two main ways to access the proposed rezoning is to turn in from Haynes Haven Drive off of Memorial or to turn into James Drive off of Northfield. James Drive is a school zone. And when you look at the intersection of Haynes Haven and James Drive, it is only a two-way stop, not a four-way stop. And that is the intersection mentioned earlier that is a bus stop for, I know Siegel High School, I would assume Siegel Middle School as well, if not the same bus. I'm also a Rutherford County teacher, and so, I mean, it's very well known in this community. Within the first week of school, we had 3 pedestrians, 2 walking to school, 1 recently getting off the bus, hit on the way to and from school. So when we think it can't happen in our community, it can. So I just ask for you to respectfully reject the proposal tonight. I echo all of the sentiments here, but just specifically on building apartments where one of the main ways to access is a school zone just seems, it's just not going to work. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Warren.
I'm Valerie Martin, and I live at 207 Peacock Avenue, and I strongly object to this rezoning request for many of the reasons that have already been given, of course, traffic, but drainage. We have water problems in our subdivision. When it comes a good rain, we have a lake in our backyard now, and we don't know what this is going to contribute to the drainage. And I'm opposed to destroying the atmosphere at Adams Place. It's beautiful. They're great neighbors, and I'm glad they're there. But we don't need all of these apartments. We just don't. And frankly, and I hate to say this, but what's driving it is greed, more money. Somebody wants to make more money at the expense of all of us. Thank you, and please vote against it.
Next.
Hello, my name is Juanita Bowman, and I live at 123 Love Court. We have lived there, I've lived there since 2000, and we've had a great experience. It's a very quiet neighborhood. Lately, it has become, even Love Court has become a cut through from Northfield to Memorial, even though you do take your life in your hands if you're trying to turn left. And I am very concerned about doubling even the amount of cars that would be going into Adams Place. As everybody said, it is a great facility, and I am very glad it's here. But I am concerned that that many cars would be coming and going. And as it's already been stated, they're coming in onto Haynes Haven anyway. So I just think we have enough traffic concerns as it is. I'm also a teacher. I teach at Middle Tennessee Christian School, so I come out that every day and take a right to go to school, and I have to wait just to get out in the mornings. And then as I'm coming home, between 3:30 and 4:30, if I'm turning left into Love Court, I may have to sit there 5 minutes or 10 minutes to get in. So I think we have enough going on right there as it is. And if you put a 3-story building, I'm sorry, I don't care how many trees you have, it's not going to disguise what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else?
Hi, my name's Doug Genrich. I live at 411 Haynes Haven Lane. This to me is purely a public safety issue. That's where I'm coming from as someone who worked in public safety for 20 years and drove in some of the worst traffic in the world. I can tell you that like everybody's echoed here, to turn left off onto Haynes Haven from Memorial is archaic, scary, and really unacceptable from a public standpoint. We're taxpayers. You're a public board whose taxes we help pay for. We help pay for a light that I'd have to say, my experience with the gate has been the opposite. I can't get in or out. Pressure release or not, we have tried and sat there and had to wait for somebody to go through in order to get through. It's my understanding that the light is public domain, which then makes it where we don't have access to it, and which puts us out on Haynes Haven, which literally you're taking your life into your own hands when you turn. So please respectfully look at this and please deny it. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else? Anybody? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And now we will attempt to answer any questions. I think the main question is going to be anybody that can shed any light on the traffic impact for the area with the number of units that are proposed and how that affects traffic. Who can answer that? Mr. Blomley, you think that's Mr. Roundtree?
Mr. Roundtree probably needs to take a stab at it.
We'd like to respond the best we can to the majority of the concerns that we heard. So, and we also would love to hear directly your concerns that we can address as well. As far as, I made a mistake when I got up here. I forgot to tell why we're doing this. And the reason we're doing this, and I think there's plenty of folks that have their opinion on that for sure, but there is a need in Murfreesboro, and we know there's a need.
Please do not yell out or talk. You've had your chance to talk, and now we need to have some answers and then let the Planning Commission discuss it. And if you can just respect our time and let us hear and discuss this as well, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Roundtree?
So we went the plan development route because we were asking for some exceptions, but we're also changing the character from the original building. Originally, we had the plan development has 364 units approved. We're asking for 339. So it's not a matter of whether the units could be approved or not based on the history of the plan development. From my understanding, it's really trying to be as respectful to the campus, respectful to the neighborhood, and do our best to try to make it a win-win scenario as best we can. So I want you to realize that Adams Place saw this based on their original opportunity to build 364 units on that campus. We are proposing 339 units on that campus. There is a need for senior living within Murfreesboro. Adams Place it's a very nice place. There's no one who wants to destroy the character of Adams Place. We want to preserve the character of Adams Place, but for more people. And that's sometimes hard to stomach, that our population's aging. I have just reached the line where I can qualify to live in Adams Place. So it is what it is. We're getting older. There's a need in our community for senior living, and this is a response by NHC to respond to what they're hearing from their market studies, that there is a need for this. As a result, the last thing they want to do is destroy the character of Adams Place and the culture of Adams Place. That is not on their registration screen. They understand that it has a presence in this community. They understand that it's prominent in the community. We understand that everyone who lives at Adams Place feels very honored to live there, and the neighbors have acknowledged that it's an honorable place. They're glad that it's there. The question is just because it's an honorable place means you cannot disturb it or change it when there's a growing need for a population to have a place to live. So I know it's a wrestling match to consider this as why would we even ask for this request? The request is based on a need. Is there an opportunity to make more money? Unfortunately, there is. But I need money. Most people do. But that is not the primary purpose for this exercise. This is a chance to fulfill the original vision of the founders of Adams Place. The RS-15 lots were there as a buffer. We understand that. But we realize that by changing the zoning to PUD for those lots, it does allow the campus to have a little bit more breathing room. Because if 364 units are already approved, and we now put up a row of houses along that property line, it'll be much more dense. It would require us to add the new construction to the existing building. Our intention was to create a separation from the existing building to minimize the amount of disturbance on campus. That's why these buildings are a little bit more on the perimeter of the property, because we are approved to go ahead and add additions to the existing facility. So we just wanted to make that clear. As far as the setback, again, most of that is to preserve green space around the buildings, within the buildings, and try to keep the campus-like character. It's been quoted that it's 20 feet off the road. It's not. It's 20 feet off the right-of-way. So there's more room than the residents are probably understanding as far as the distance between the actual structure and the property line and the road. So we wanted to bring that for clarification. As far as the gate can be solved. That's a pretty easy one. We'll put an access-controlled element. It will work properly, and it will no longer be a cut-through. I am sorry that Haynes Haven has traffic issues that relates to all kinds of peripheral issues. We're running into that. I've tried to zone some things in Haynes Haven, and I realize it's a tight community, but it also has some innate issues, primarily with the schools and that circulation. We are a age-restricted community. We're asking for a reduction in parking because folks that are in this situation are not your typical drivers. They're not going to typically have two cars. They're not typically going to work at normal hours. They tend to have a little bit more flexibility in their schedule. Now, that's not everyone's situation. However, that is a lot of the situations of the folks at Adams Place. So we don't realize, or we're not totally convinced that the traffic that's going to be generated from Adams Place is going to be a major sticking point as far as how it'll function within the neighborhood. If that gate's, there will be, to one of the presenters' points, is that if we live in the new independent living units and we want to go out to Memorial and take a right, they probably will go through those gates, take a left onto Haynes Haven, and take a right onto Memorial. But Memorial is a major thoroughfare, and it's a commercial building, and on a major thoroughfare, there's nothing more we can ask from you as leaders, from our city as circulation. If it doesn't work well, that's because the city is growing quicker than we can keep up. But does that prevent us from meeting the need for a senior population? Does that tell us not to grow our community because there's traffic congestion? Unfortunately, it's just the nature of living in this area. It's something that we have to wrestle with all the time. With the drainage concern that was brought up multiple times, drainage is always a concern. And I've learned through a lot of this rezoning processes that when we are doing new construction, there are chances to solve problems that are created by drainage. We don't have a full history of all the things going on with the drainage, but we will be doing engineering with this new construction, and our goal would be to alleviate any concerns that are presently there. Obviously, there's rules about keeping our water on site, but there may be migration water coming in from off-site that can be handled. So we feel like once we get into an engineering mode, we can deal with the drainage. But I just want to conclude with the architectural character, the campus quality, the landscaping. All those concerns have been addressed. Whether they're addressed to the level of satisfaction, that's what we're hearing. But our intention was to keep the character along Memorial, along the main entrance, along Haynes Haven Lane, preserve as much of the mature landscaping as possible, and provide opportunities for more people to benefit from living at Adams Place. The Amenity Center is something that we feel like could be a beautiful asset to the community. Again, it brings in new people. It brings in people that are not part of the current community, but it could bring a different type of person that could bring another level of vitality to people. You never know. The assumption is everyone who's going to move into these places is not someone you want to know, but we believe there will be people you'll want to know. And so we would like to provide a place for them to live so that they can experience Adams Place. And at the end of the day, even though I'm qualified to live, I'm not there yet mentally that I'm moving into my last home. But the fact of the matter is that there's something beautiful about that. That if you can know where you're going to go and stay there for the duration of your life, that's a pretty neat thing. And Adams Place, that's where we're going with this. We're not trying to create traffic congestion or just create apartments. I even hate the term apartments because it seems so derogatory to what we're trying to do. But the fact of the matter is we're providing an opportunity for people to age in place, which is a beautiful thing if that's an opportunity that we get to face. So with that in mind, I'm willing to answer any questions you may have. We have leadership here that can answer maybe more intimate questions about the operation. But I did want to respond to what we've heard. I appreciate everyone's feedback. It's not easy to get up here and state your concerns. But the challenge we all have is that we're living in a world where we just have to kind of move forward on lots of different issues and try to assess the best decisions we can make.
You have a question? Go ahead.
So, again, I want to make sure I understand what you can do by right versus what you're proposing, okay? So how many units do we have currently?
Currently? Yeah, there's several components, Ken. Where are we at currently, guys, exactly?
I think independent living, that would be what we'd be most interested in.
So yeah, Ken, there's memory
driving
care, there's
part of things. So
more
89
assisted
units.
living, 89 independent living.
So, well, we're using the term that we have the right, at least that I thought I heard you say, of being able to have 339 units on this property. What were you referencing?
No, 364 was the original development.
So where is that number in? That's what I'm trying to figure out. If you were approved for 364, and however those units were defined at 364, where are we today? Are we at 364 based upon can somebody help me here?
286. Yeah. 286.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
So that includes independent, assisted, anything in healthcare and memory care.
It would probably be good if Mr. Ussery would come to the mic and so we could get him on record.
And they were approved for 364.
Yeah.
Chairman Jones, Commission, my name is Mike Ussery. I'm the President, Chief Operating Officer of NHC. My address is 2508 Belfast Court, Murfreesboro.
So, Mike or Clyde, so you by right, you would have, whether we had this meeting or not, you would have the right to increase the number of units based upon the original plan. My guess is, though, you could not go any more than 2 stories based upon, so help me here. What was originally approved that you could do on this property, forget the exceptions that you're trying to make, what was originally approved that you could do on this property in reference to the height of buildings?
My understanding is the approval is for additional 3-story construction on the PUD site.
Can somebody from the city confirm that?
Ms. Green.
I did review the program book, and the program book did not speak to height, but I can tell you what, and it may be easier to see numbers written. So the original plan is...
They did not do this.
Was divided into 4 phases. Phase 1, 40 nursing home beds and 84 assisted living units. Phase 2, 60 nursing home beds. Phase 3, 90 independent living units. Phase 4, 90 independent units. Terminology's changed a little bit since then, but how they, on their website, I went to their website to see what's there now because that was the only way I know to do it. They say they have 89 apartment residential units, 23-room memory care, and 90-bed health care center with nursing and rehabilitation. So if you add up those, it's 202 versus 364. Now it's specific, the type of units. The 364 was to be located on 16.6 acres, excluding the RS-15. But adding the RS-15, which is 5.4 acres, to the 16.6 acres makes this application 22 acres. So the application size has gotten bigger. So they were originally approved for more units than they have now, but there were restrictions based on the location of those units. There were no, that I can read, and I would need to do more research, there were nothing that was talked about the height of the structures.
Okay.
I would assume that the structures could have been more than 2 stories in order to get 364 units on 16.6 acres.
So the current building, the Independent, I believe, is the tallest. Is it 2 stories or 3 stories? That's what I thought.
3 stories is what the architects.
That's what they have right now in the U-shaped Independent, which you just said was 89 units in independent living. Okay. So it is a 3-story building right now. Go ahead. I have
So
another
at some
question.
point, there was a plan for the additional 90 units without using the space.
There was, and in 94, when the plan development was done, it was done differently than they are today. So there wasn't like a book with all the conditions that we have now. There was an ordinance that added the special conditions and then one concept sheet. So there was a concept sheet at the time, but there wasn't any specifics about architecture or the detail that we really get into today. Didn't really happen in the same way by the landscape architect and civil that we normally see. So there's a concept plan, and the last version of it, I'll show you what it looks like, is this. This sheet was attached to an ordinance. And this is when I said they did the little addition, the 5,000 square foot, less than 5,000 square foot addition. This is what it looked like. Now, there was also a larger exhibit that was folded up and put in the packet as well that was shown at the meeting. But this is just a sheet out of our ordinance.
Can you leave that up for just 1 second?
Yes, sure.
So does that represent a build-out to the existing plan that's there, or is it separate from the plan that's there? Or was the plan even built like this?
I couldn't tell you. I just know that that's what was in the.
That's probably a question.
I've got the aerial,
I can get the aerial if that's what they want. Yeah, okay.
So I've done some research at our office since we did the original plan, and there was an original site master plan that went with the initial development of this site, and that was approved by the city, obviously, to move forward with construction. And there were 2 phase 4, which is the phase that has not been built out, the 90 units, 2 phase 4 wings proposed adjacent to the existing independent living building. Both were about 14,000 square feet in footprint. So we're assuming those would probably have to be a 4-story addition each to hit that 90 unit number. So we can track down that document and send it to you if that would be helpful.
Another question, and this is really in relation to an email that came up, one of our emails. Somebody had asked about why didn't you build this in that back corner? You know, really it backs up to like Sprouts and everything. Is that all? That's a drainage easement back there, I believe. And I just wanted to state that for whoever asked that question in an email, saying why couldn't they just do it on the back corner as opposed to on the front corner? So I just wanted to mention that, and it had that in that, we could see that in that drawing. The other thing that I thought maybe either Mr. Ussery or you might be able to answer for us, the references that we're hearing to adding more apartments, and we don't need more apartments. I think there's some, and just for the Planning Commission and just in general, how do you refer to the units, the 89 units that are currently in independent living at Adams Place? I think originally those were all purchased from, or however you did that at that time, but I understand now some of them are also leased, so maybe, I don't know, are they all apartments, or are they all, I know they're all homes, but I was just wanting clarification on the reference to the apartments.
Right, Chairman Jones, that is true. Originally, when Adams Place was developed, it was intended to allow the buy-in option. I would tell you that now, about 3/4 of the residents at Adams Place are on the lease, as you describe it.
Okay.
So about 3/4 actually are doing the rental versus the buy-in option.
Okay, and so that'll probably be, if you were to get this approved, when we're referring to those as apartments, it is basically the way it has kind of developed over time.
I think that's right. It's really been in response to the market, and we've seen that really nationally, not just in Murfreesboro, but that's been a much more attractive option to a lot of people. You know, the way I look at these units, as you refer to them, apartments, I mean, currently we have the independent living apartments. They are homes to those residents, absolutely. That's what we anticipate these to be. We anticipate these to be a senior living option, a slightly different variation for active adults. But we would refer to these as independent living apartments, a similar but different type from what we currently are operating.
So I just wanted that clarification. I think so you're saying the new residents in this would have the same option to lease and/or live in their home, that they end up being referred to as apartments, but not apartments like we are used to talking about up here at Planning Commission when we're talking about apartment homes. Very different. Because all these people live in wonderful, beautiful apartment homes. I've seen many of them. They're beautiful. So I did have one more kind of question or concern I wanted to mention, and I'm not sure, maybe this is Mr. Pettit. Just concern about the 20-foot setback, again, on Haynes Haven side, and if there's, is there any wiggle room there on that? I do believe that probably 40-foot setback is the main, those are RS-15 lots on Haynes Haven Lane that probably have a 40-foot setback. And I think one of the things that is confusing is that's 40 feet from the right-of-way, which is not always exactly the street edge. So is that, anybody, if 40 foot is the Haynes Haven Lane? And then we'll get some clarification. Sorry, Mr. Roundtree, I stuck another question in there before I let you answer.
You're correct. The lots that are zoned RS-15 have a 40-foot front setback. The property that we're looking at on Adams Place has two fronts, one along Memorial Boulevard and a second along Haynes Haven Lane. And so the setback is 40 feet from the property line. Generally, our streets are located within what we call a public right-of-way, which is a dimension of space. Somewhere within that public right-of-way is the street. On modern streets, that public right-of-way is typically 42 feet, and that includes grass strips, it includes curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and streets. These are older streets that are wider than our minimums are now. So the right-of-way line is actually somewhere behind the street itself, and we use our GIS for reference. It is not survey accurate. You cannot use it for a survey, and we have an actual surveyor to come out, but it gives you a good idea if you want to see the right-of-way line in relation to the street. And so I just went to our public website, which anybody has access to, and I can turn on ortho data, and you can see some, and they're not easy to see for a lot of people, but a green line. That green line indicates the property line or an approximate location of it. So you can see within green line here and the green line here, the road is actually a smaller distance. And so the 40 feet is measured from the property line back,
Okay.
not actually from the street itself.
How deep are those lots today?
The RS-15 lots?
Yes.
Okay. They are on a plat, so I can tell you.
158,
80?
150.
Oh, really?
So lots 1 through 5 here, this is a plat that represents those. Of course, the plat's older, and you can see that they're about 160 feet deep.
160.
160, 130 wide.
And do you think the 160 is from the green line? Or
It
do you
is
think
from the green line, it's
it
not
is?
from the street.
Okay.
This shows you that the public right-of-way
I'm with
is
you.
60 feet wide. That street is not 60 feet wide.
Okay.
And that's about 20 feet wider than our streets are today, except for commercial streets, which of course are wider.
Margaret Ann, while you're up here, can you please clarify on, I noticed in the plan book, it talks about if landscaping is damaged and or removed during the construction process, they'll replace it pursuant to section 27 of the code. Can you clarify what those requirements would be?
I think they're saying Mr. Roundtree believes that quite a bit of landscaping can be preserved. Sometimes our experience is that during the construction process, contractors aren't as savvy with protecting landscaping, and so if they're damaged, what happens then? And so section 27 is a section of the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance that deals strictly with landscaping, and so they're saying they would meet minimum standards. And so along a property boundary, we have a perimeter planting yard where you see a tree maybe every 40 or 50 feet. And then parking spaces are required to be buffered or screened. And so they're really just talking about meeting minimum standards as referenced in our zoning ordinance. The additional standards would be what they're committing to in the book. So the additional standards would be the berm. And that's not in section 27. That's something beyond our minimum.
So for example, I think those are magnolia trees that align along Haynes Haven that are very large. And if something happens to those during construction, they'll be replaced just with the minimum standards. I mean, it looks like on page 22 of the plan book, they're, very short compared to the large magnolia trees.
That is the way I read the book as well. Mr. Roundtree can speak to it.
Okay.
And I have page 22 available if you need to show it.
Yes. Can you put page 22? Oh, perfect. Thank you. Margaret Ann, you're so great.
Okay, so the larger tree you see on the right side, that would be a preservation of trees that are existing. As far as the 3 foot, that was referenced as someone kind of took that horizontally. The 3 foot is actually an increase in height of the berm. The berms are really substantial. We believe that from the history, it was really, as they cut the project, they just basically distributed dirt on that side. So they're really not your typical berm that you'd see at a normal development. They're very large and gradual. So we would be, in areas where they're disturbed, it'd be much more abrupt, more like a typical berm you'd see at Walmart or somewhere else across, more of our typical protection type of berm and landscaping berm. So because of it's a little deceiving. There's several things that are a little interesting. If you can notice the road elevation and the finished floor elevations, these buildings are going to be recessed down in grade naturally. If you're on Haynes Haven, it feels like you're kind of on an edge of a pit. That whole area has a real recessed feeling. So we feel like even though the buildings are tall, that the fact that you're going to be going down grade, that's going to take out a portion of that lower level to begin with. And then we also feel like by preserving the existing landscape, which is fully our intention, you're gonna take a little bit more of that volume out. And then wherever it's displaced, we would do our best to, you can't go out and buy a 30-foot magnolia tree. You can't. I mean, you can, but it's not as practical.
You can, yeah.
But we would do our best to meet the objective of what the berming is accomplishing. If it's larger material than Section 27, that would be our goal. Again, our goal is to minimize any disturbance because there's a lot of motivation to keep that material. Really, our goal from the get-go is to try to keep Memorial Drive consistent. If you drive down Memorial, you may see through those trees and see there's a structure back there, but those trees are doing a job for us along the main access road and the main entrance. We wanted to preserve as many of those trees as possible, and then along Haynes Haven, the same. So all the movement we've made with the buildings is trying to respect all three, basically the two frontages and the main access point. So our goal, because again, Adams Place has a very elegant level of landscaping, so we would do our best to follow suit. We don't want it to look like a drop-off when the new units come in. We would want to augment that landscaping to make it look very consistent with the character of Adams Place.
Yeah, I think I struggle with that. I went and walked the area today, and I apologize for trespassing on Adams Place property, but I walked the area, and those magnolia trees are very large, and they're intrusive, and I'm having a hard time believing that they won't be damaged and or wiped out during construction. It happens, I understand, and to replace them with the minimum standards of the city it's a big issue for me. But you've made your case, so thank you. I want to ask about the current height. I know we said the buildings are 3-story. Do you guys know how high exactly, though, the tallest building is at Adams Place?
Not an exact number.
Okay.
I mean, it would be at least with to the average of the roof line, because typically the heights are to the middle of on a pitch roof, so it's probably 40 feet to the average of the roof line.
Okay, it looks like the tallest proposed now is 49 feet and 6 inches. Does that sound right? So we anticipate these buildings being taller than the current structures?
Not necessarily. I mean, that was me guessing on the 40 of the existing. So I mean, we would have to, we could measure it, and we can find the original drawings for the original buildings on campus and give you that number, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay.
But it would be no more than these, because the floor to floor on the existing buildings is probably higher than what we are proposing on these apartments.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pettis, did you say the floor to floor on this new building is higher than the existing?
It should be less, actually, sorry, than
less.
the existing. The existing probably has more infrastructure based on the building type, since these are a more residential style apartment building. The floor-to-floor space is probably going to be reduced.
Margaret Ann, can I borrow you back, please? Thank you. So hypothetically, as sympathetic as I am and as grateful as I am for Adams Place's role in the community, if this were a residential development, if any of our local developers had built a community right here on Memorial Boulevard and reserved 5 lots and made them RS-15 in the original PUD book, and come back 20 years later and wanted to rezone those to put multifamily on it, what's the likelihood that would have gone well?
I think that I have seen scenarios where there were commitments for something to remain a certain way, and then we realized that we grew from a city of 60,000 people to a city of 150,000 people, and our reality is different. And I have seen where people, where you don't know about something and then live with it and think that where initially you thought it was a bad idea, after so many years you believe that it's an asset to the community. So I would not say the fact that a body made a decision 30 years ago takes away your ability to make a different decision today. But I do know that that's a big part of moving forward. And I think what I normally see is, hypothetically, looking at all the ways you can reduce the impact. So maybe things change, because in Murfreesboro we see change as a daily reality in so many aspects of our lives. But the goal is generally, well, what can this plan do to reduce any negative impacts that come from there? So I have seen things change that maybe you thought wouldn't, but it's not a decision that's taken lightly. It's something that's really, you have different information later than you had at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we can have different information, but I went back and read the minutes and planning department's summary, and item number 1 on the requirements of this getting approved in that amendment was that those 5 lots would remain RS-15. And it just feels like we're reversing all of that, so.
And it's something that even though I wasn't here then, I was in college, it's something that that institutional knowledge was passed down to me, and people who were a part of the process said, this was a very involved process. The neighbors really had a voice and an input, and the reason they knew back in 2000 the gate stopped working is because the neighbors called and told us. And so if something in the future comes up, go look in the files, because ordinarily we don't have 40-year-old files, 30-year-old files to reference. And so I did know to look in the files, and we did ask them to hold a neighborhood meeting, and I went to the neighborhood meeting. I was very surprised that there weren't a lot of Haynes Haven residents. There were many, many Adams Place residents, and I think that they gave some valuable feedback to the plan. But I was anticipating a lot more input, but then I think maybe there's been a lot of time, and some people have only lived there for 22 years as opposed to before then. But it is something that I knew that I should research because it's important to the people who live around there.
I'm glad you did.
And I just want to remind all of us that, we have 5 public hearings tonight. Every one of them is to make a change to some existing zoning on the property, whether that zoning was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 30 years ago. So every month when we're here having public hearings, we are always looking to make a change to something that a body like ours before us voted one way, and now we're making a decision on whether we think it's the right thing at this point in time based on what we're looking at and what we're seeing. Is it the right thing at this point in time to make a change to that plan that was voted on in many cases last year, 2 years ago, but definitely 20 and 30 years ago? So it is just part of what we do every month. And, I've reminded some people sometimes if we quit changing our zoning, we don't need a planning commission at all. We just leave it just like it is. We never do anything else. And then, we would all live in a very different place. But we definitely, I don't want to say that I don't agree with what the Planning Commission did in 1995, and that I think that the agreement to keep the 5 RS-15 lots was because there was so much hesitation on the part of the Haynes Haven residents. But I think the majority of Haynes Haven residents, at least in a lot of their comments, stated that Adams Place had been a very good neighbor. And at the point in time in 1995, they didn't know what was going to happen, but it was very imposing at the time. But I do want to say, this is what we do up here as a planning commission, is to make a decision on whether an existing zoning is the zoning that it needs to stay, or is it time to look at maybe something different.
I agree. I mean, yes, they're all amendments to the zoning. I would just hope that in 15 or 20 years, if they're, reevaluating something that we decided, I would want our reasoning to be a factor. And I think the minutes are a very XYZ factor.
Yeah. And we'll be in 2 years looking at something we looked at this year.
Will you still be here in 20 years?
No.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a couple comments. One, I'm going to agree with Mr. Roundtree. I see it every day. We are substantially behind on 55 and up housing in Murfreesboro. I mean, substantially behind. Now, that's not speaking for or against this particular project. That's saying it is a fact that Murfreesboro City is substantially behind in 55 and up housing. My major concern is the traffic. I'd almost like to see the gate just totally kiboshed and push all the internal traffic to the stoplight and not onto Haynes Haven. That way, I don't care if it's a worker, cross traffic, internal traffic, or whatever, just push it to the stoplight and let the signal take care of it. 2, the apartments or units that we're looking at now, they look like quote-unquote apartments. Yep. The rest of the project does not look like a quote-unquote apartment. So the architectural style does change the feel and the makeup of the project to make it look like an apartment, where the rest of the project does not. So it does change the makeup of Haynes Haven, looking at what looks like an apartment building and not the rest of Adams Place. When I'm looking at these PUD amendments, it's always good to know what the prior amendment, we keep going back to this 364, they have rights to 364, and we're talking about 330 now. Well, what does that old plan look like? And the architectural gentleman said he could come up with those plans. I would like to see this deferred, and let's see those plans, because let's see what's more obtrusive to the neighborhood, the plan that's already on the books that they can turn dirt on right now and build, or what we have in front of us, because all of these people in this room, if they looked at that other plan and goes, wow, that's a lot worse, they may go, whoa, let's talk about this amendment plan. But if they look at this amendment plan and go, no, we like what was better before, let's build that, or let's build what this is, it'd be good to have all the facts where everybody can look at it, all the information, maybe even have another neighborhood meeting and compare the old plan and the new plan, and maybe make some change. If this new plan is the better plan, maybe look at this architecture and go, you know what, this does look kind of apartment-ish. Maybe we need to change the architecture to look more like Adams Place now, because it would maybe make the feel from Haynes Haven look a little different. But the traffic is the main concern. That's the thing we heard from all of these people out here is the traffic. So I'd like to see it deferred, whether we defer it or the applicant defers it, and let's get some more information and see what's better for the community of Haynes Haven, and not just what's better for Adams Place also.
Yeah, and I agree, and I haven't even gotten to my issues with the architecture yet. I'm not an architectural person. Yeah.
And we have, I think we have issues with architecture.
Yes, without a doubt. To quote Rick LaLance, it's the heartache.
We don't know if we're going to get there, so.
Well, I guess from my point of view on the traffic, it's going to have to be addressed one way or the other. They have the right to put the same amount of traffic that they're asking for. Actually, they have the right to put more traffic than what they're asking
because
for.
Of the 364.
So whatever the plan is, it needs to address the traffic regardless. And that was one of the things that came out of this originally was they have the right currently, whether we vote on it or not, to put 90 more units out there.
Right. And
whether they put it inside these 5 lots or whether they put it inside the community itself, it's still going to put the same amount of traffic out on the streets. The question is do you look at it from the standpoint of what was approved originally, which is only the residents get to use the gate, or is it like it is today, when I drove up, anybody can use the gate?
Mm-hmm.
So that got ahead of me, but I agree with what Warren and what Shauna said. Being on the planning commission as long as I have, you got to look at what they have the right to do, and and we're getting a matter of semantics here. Apartments has a negative connotation. Independent living units has a good marketing twist on it. But however you look at it, they have the right to put 90 more independent living units, apartment units, whatever you want to call them, on this property. And so it's a matter of, in my view, coming up with a plan and a compromise to a degree that everybody can live with. One of the things that I've got heartache over is the setback. That's why I asked technically right now you've got a 160-foot setback if you want to look at it that way. So to take it to take 140 feet, in essence, that's what we're asking to do from where we technically saying that setback is today, based upon the fact that it has to stay RS-15. Somewhere there's got to be a compromise there, because that's a big number. It's kind of like when we were dealing with these squat boxes that's just a big number with respects to how many feet that we're talking about from Haynes Haven. Then back to their point is that, okay, what are we going to do with this gate? What are we truly talking about as to we may be decreasing the number of car count that's going through this gate by just saying you're only going to let the residents use this gate versus the number of people, the Warrens of the world, that are going through the gate today. I mean, truly. I mean, you know, everybody can sit here and argue the point, but my guess is theoretically you could be decreasing the number of vehicles that would be going on that road, depending on how you regulate that gate. So I'm in agreement with deferring it because I think we've got some work to do here, but I think you've heard from the folks here, and I think, and I'll let my fellow planning commission members that haven't spoken, let them give you their input also.
I got one more comment to make also. We got a large contingency of people who are clients at Adams Place sitting here speaking against it. I mean, that's concerning to me. We're not talking about people that live in the neighborhood adjacent. We're talking about the people on the property. That's a concern.
May I?
Yes, you may.
Chairman. And I appreciate that, and I agree. We received the correspondence just today. So we really have been scrambling all day trying to determine how to respond to this. Certainly, nobody values the residents of Adams Place more than we do. Sure. And I think that should go without saying. But
yeah, obviously.
and we appreciate that and certainly want to be responsive to that.
Yeah. But I want to give them, if they want to defer, I want to give them the option to defer. And
I agree.
The clock.
Mr. Roundtree, have you discussed with your client, or do you know whether?
Yeah, we would like to thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the in-house residents as well as the neighbors associated with the project. We will do our best to try to find what that compromise is. So we would like to ask for deferral, and we do appreciate your feedback. And we will try to navigate on how best to correspond with you through the specific issues that are related to your perspective on this project. So the staff has been wonderful to help guide us through this, but I think there's some pretty specific concerns from the planning commissioners. So we'll reach out to you individually as well to make sure that we can know if there is any kind of compromise within your position as well. So thank you for the time. Chairman Jones, thank you for leading this, and we would like to defer at this time.
Mr. Roundtree, are you requesting an indefinite deferral until you address these concerns?
Indefinite deferral.
All right. I think y'all would need to vote on that as well.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to defer this item. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all very much, and thank you to everyone for coming out tonight and giving us all your thoughts and comments. Look forward to seeing you again. Thanks a lot. And if I could ask, if everyone, if you all don't mind, making your way out into the lobby to visit and continue your conversations, because we do have more public hearings tonight. Thanks so much.
I let him do that room.
Okay.
Would you like a Diet Coke?
All right. I think we're ready to move on to our next item. Next, we have a zoning application for approximately 116.7 acres located along Burnt Knob Road, Blackman Road, and Vaughn Road to be rezoned from Park to CH and GDO 1. City of Murfreesboro Administration Department is the applicant. Ms. Rush, good evening.
Good evening, Chair Jones, Commissioners. The property is located along the north side of Interstate 840, Vaughn Road and Burnt Knob Road. It's just to the east of Veterans Parkway Interchange. As you stated, the applicant is the City Administration Department, and the request is to rezone the property from Park Zoning District to Commercial Highway with a GDO, Gateway Design Overlay 1 District. On June 23rd, the City Council voted to approve an exchange of land with Middle Tennessee Electric of this subject property, which is 116 acres, with their property further south, approximately 1 mile, that's 149 acres on Veterans Parkway. This current project subject property is a city-owned property, which is highly visible from Interstate 840, as you can see on the map, and it makes it well-suited for corporate headquarters and other future business development, and less suited for a city park due to the lack of city residential property in the general proximity of the site. Whereas the MTE property that the city had entered into agreement for the land swap is surrounded by current city residential properties. The purpose of the rezoning is for the proposed CH and GDO overlay would be to allow for business development opportunities to be established there, and the GDO overlay will help to ensure that the development is at a higher quality of site for both building design and site design. And it also restricts some of the uses that can be established there. Recently, several other properties that are shown in the CH have also had a GDO 1 overlay combined onto that property, as well as the ones located south of Interstate 840 along that interchange. The future land use map currently shows this as a business park, which is identified for offices and R&D type of development. The city's also working on updating the future land use map, and the proposed future land use map that's in progress depicts this site as employment generating. In both cases, the rezoning that's proposed is consistent with the future land use map. Staff is recommending the rezoning because it's consistent with the vision for the property. It's consistent with the zoning of adjacent parcels, and the GDO 1 will help ensure quality design of the site and of the buildings. Staff is asking the Planning Commission to discuss this item, open a public hearing, and make a recommendation to the City Council. Our Executive Director of Development Services, Mr. Huddleston, is going to make a short presentation to help explain a little bit more about the project.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rush.
Good evening, Chair Jones, members of the Planning Commission. I do have just a short presentation as the applicant tonight. To give you some insight into this, and I think Ms. Rush did a great job giving the background on this and tying this to the other property, which will come up in the next rezoning. So I will try to cover this property, but I'll link it to the other exchange to the extent we can here, and then be glad to discuss any of the details on that. And so the subject property there is showing on your screen. Ms. Rush talked about the land swap between Middle Tennessee Electric and the city that has an actual condition on the closing that the city consider and rezone this property to commercial highway. The rezoning is scheduled to close, the land swap is scheduled to close December the 31st of this year. And so we're really in that due diligence period and understanding it takes about 5 months to effect a rezoning. We're starting that process with the Planning Commission. Our request tonight is to rezone the property from Park to Commercial Highway and Gateway Design Overlay 1, as was explained. So the city-owned property, why CH and GDO 1? Well, circumstances have changed. Middle Tennessee Electric has no plans for a new corporate headquarters. And we'll talk about that shortly, but that's significant in that that changed their view and their direction of the property that they have and how they might use it. And so the 150 acres that they have then became something that they needed to understand a future use for. At the time that the city was looking at this for a park, quite honestly, we didn't have the money as we looked at priorities and spending and cost. We didn't have the money to build the plan that was shown for the park. And so, those circumstances have changed, and that's why we're here today. And I think Ms. Rush also laid out a great vision for the land, potential for economic development, the interstate interchange. As we know, interstate interchanges are important to communities. It's where some of the most intense activities occur because of the easy access to the transportation corridors. And so this property is important to us, again, because of that 840 access and 840 visibility. Ms. Rush also mentioned the future land use plans, which include identifying this property appropriately for a business park and employment generating opportunities. And then finally, Veterans Parkway has long been viewed as a western entrance into the city. I don't want to use the term gateway because that term is so well defined and well used with that part of our community already, but that western entrance where this is an opportunity to set the stage for entry into the west side of our community. And then I found this gem, which is an excerpt from the Blackman Land Use Plan. Ms. Jones, I recall you represented the Planning Commission on that committee. And that was in December of 2000. This is the character defined for the property that we're considering tonight. It says planned mixed-use area, retail office, civic, institutional, high-density residential that accommodates regional employment opportunities. And so over 20 years ago, our community recognized the importance of this property, the transportation network that was in play, and identified this as a potential property. So it's already adjacent to land zoned commercial highway GDO 1, the interstate visibility, the future road networks, which are on our major transportation plan for that series of 5-lane roadways, and then 3-lane upgrade for Blackman as it moves south, the interstate access. And we did host a community meeting last week. I would estimate that there were 45 to 50 residents there, plus city staff and other interested parties. We had about 2.5 hours of presentation, engagement, and question and discussion out there. And we did notify property owners within a 500-foot radius or 500 foot of this property boundary, as well as the currently owned property by MTE. And so we had a good representation of our community there. And so with that, I'll be available for questions now or after the public hearing, and certainly our other staff members would be as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Huddleston. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay. Then we will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item.
My name is Alice Hilton. I live at 122 Gritton Court, which is 500 feet from the property in question, and I was at last week's meeting. I've been at every meeting regarding this park since before you even bought it. I was there when you came to our neighborhood, to Blackman United and to Blackman High School, and you said, maybe not you guys, but the people who were in charge at that time, told the people of Blackman that that piece of property was going to be used as a park for our neighborhood and for our residents and for all the new people coming to our area. And here you show me on your screen that you've known it's been commercial since 2000. Guess what? Jig's up. You guys annexed it under false pretenses so that you could make it city property. It's yours now. Congratulations.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Anybody?
Good evening. Chairman, Planning Commission, Johnny O'Beatty, live in Blackman. Seeing that, Sam, that you put up there that the Blackman land use plan, I was on that. I didn't know it was that long ago.
We were
But,
both a lot
we've
younger
worked-
then, weren't we?
Yes,
We were
you
both
were
a
too.
lot younger then.
We've worked hard over the last, I guess, 18, 17 years trying to get a park out there. And I can see the land that you're going to swap for this from Middle Tennessee Electric has more acreage, more use. And as you was talking about earlier, the development and time changes. And things change and you have to change with it. Traffic has still changed. It's more of it, but it's been no solution to that yet. We're getting the same way out there. I can see it for the city because Middle Tennessee Electric's not going to use it. They're the land, and y'all would be better off over there, just as long as we've been trying to get a park. And Little Blackman Community Club, the 2 acres we've got, it is covered up all the time with people. And we've done what the city hadn't done. We built 2 pickleball courts this year, and they're covered up with people playing in the recreation area. So I applaud y'all and all that y'all do and decisions and all that y'all have to make and do, but we still want a park. And you can move it down the road, but there's a need for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. Who else would like to speak? Anybody? Okay. We'll close the public hearing. Comments, questions on this item?
If there are no questions, I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have a zoning application for approximately 149 acres located along Veterans Parkway to be rezoned from PCD to CH and GDO1 for approximately 26.5 acres, CF approximately 30.5 acres, and P, Park, approximately 92 acres. City of Murfreesboro Administration Department is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Okay. I think my thing got closed. There it is. Yeah, let me get this one up. Yes, thank you for your patience. This property is located approximately 1 mile south of the last property that was just discussed on the agenda. It's located along the east side of Veterans Parkway. It is proposed to be rezoned from planned commercial development to park, CF, which is commercial fringe, CH, and the CH portion would have a GDO1 combining overlay district onto that. The PCD that is currently in place set forth a specific plan for development on the site that included offices as well as outdoor and indoor storage. Again, it was Middle Tennessee Electric, and their vision at the time when they had rezoned the property is different than where it is now. As presented in the prior agenda item, the City Council voted to approve an exchange of land with Middle Tennessee Electric of this property, MTE property, with the city's property further north. This site is surrounded by current city residential developments. As you can see on the map, we have RS-15 to the north, planned residential district to the east, RS-15 and RS-12 to the east, planned residential district to the south, as well as residents to the west. The purpose of the rezoning would be to allow for the development of a public park, and proposed CF and CH zoning would allow for development of other public facilities and community neighborhood services. The exact nature and character of the future uses will be determined by the City Council following the city's CIP process. Adjacent to this property, as indicated, it was a lot of residents. As such, there was proposed to be a landscape buffer that separated the residential to the north and east from this parcel. With any future development, that buffer would also be proposed to be included as part of the development, so that that would still provide that buffer between the residents and any uses that would be established at this site. The future land use map currently depicts this as a public institutional use, as if it was developed with city facilities, including a park, that would be consistent with that. The proposed future land use map that staff is working on in terms of a draft also depicts this as public institutional. So as such, the proposed rezoning would be consistent with the future land use map. Staff is recommending the rezoning because the park zoning allows for development of city parkland or other similar uses. The P zoning is contiguous to residential uses and zoning. The CF and CH with the GDO1 overlay will also allow for development of public facilities and commercial uses. And the portion that is CH GDO1 is not contiguous to the adjacent residents. It's contiguous to the Veterans Parkway portion. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and discuss the item and make a recommendation to the City Council. And again, Mr. Huddleston will provide a short presentation on this one.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
What is the distance of that buffer along the residential side?
50 feet. Want me to say it? I could repeat, but it'd be better from the horse's mouth.
I guess I should
Well, the
nay or
questioning-
nick her there. I don't know. I apologize to Ms. Rush for closing out her presentation item there. Wasn't intentional to do that, and so I apologize for that struggle and delay. So, Ms. Jones, in the booklet that Middle Tennessee Electric turned in, that buffer was shown as a 30-foot planted area, but a 50-foot reserve area, if that makes sense. And on the deed with the property, there's actually a recorded landscape and preservation easement. And as phase one of their project, Middle Tennessee Electric actually has planted that buffer and installed the chain link fence along the southern boundary of the Berkshire property. The city has no plans to take that out. It's a well-established vegetated buffer, provides great screening there, and for the residents in Berkshire, it's actually kind of an extension of their backyard without paying taxes, I guess. So, we'd look to maintain that and allow that to serve as any sort of buffer between what activities we might plan for here.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions for Ms. Rush or?
Yeah, I do. So the picture that was up earlier that showed the green park lining up with, I guess it's the north side. Anyway, so is the park just for this, whatever you just said, 50-foot? What's the distance between the property line of the houses to the PCD, to the commercial highway and GDO1 section, and then also the PCD to CF? What is that distance?
So the green strip is 100 feet from the property line.
Okay.
And which would include a 50-foot area that was identified on the original Middle Tennessee Electric and commercial development, but it would also give us some room perhaps for a walking trail or an access drive or something that might be in there. We really don't know, but that additional 50-foot would give us some room to integrate park amenities into these other land use and zones, and also be able to utilize that to some extent for park elements, whether it be a walking trail or open space or whatever might be appropriate there.
And Mr. Huddleston, so talk to us a little bit about, I think you did this in our last meeting, but I can't remember what the answer was. What are you envisioning in the commercial, in the blue area, in the commercial fringe area?
Yeah, so I covered a lot of that in this presentation. If you want me to jump right into it, and we'll answer.
Yes, that'd be great.
Questions, I think.
Didn't realize you were going to make a presentation. I'm just kidding.
So this is a property in question. By the way, I didn't acknowledge him at the start of my meeting, start of my other presentation, but I did note today that John L. Beatty was also listed as a community representative on the Blackman land use study. The room was pretty crowded, before I got up, and I didn't pick him up back there. And I do agree with his observation that the Blackman Community Club and the pickleball courts are serving a community need out there. Even though it's on a small site, it gets a lot of utilization for that property. So the property in question then tonight for this rezoning is shown here on the map in question. This is the current master plan that was in the planned commercial development. And so I think what's noteworthy here is that the center part of this site was really where all of the activity was going. It quite honestly is the best part of the land. And I think Middle Tennessee Electric and their team, when they planned this, picked the appropriate spots for some of their more intense activities. It also gives them opportunity to separate from the existing residential areas, but it does show that intense corporate use was going to be in the center of the property, and this is their entitlement today. Our request, of course, is to rezone this to those three different zoning. We'll go over that, and not to rehash it too much, but this is a companion item, although they are not contractually linked. We are not under a contractual obligation to rezone this property. We did think it was appropriate to link these two together so that we provide the context to the Planning Commission as well as to the public of the connection of these two lands and the city's intentions on how we plan to move forward. And so that's why we're requesting this tonight on behalf of the city, and also to prepare us for its intended future uses. There are a few things that stick out to us on this property. There's a TVA easement that crosses a portion of the property that actually extends into the Berkshire subdivision. And if you're familiar with that Berkshire subdivision, you know where that easement is because of the depth of the lots and the use of that for common area and open space. It's an unused easement, but we don't see the opportunity for TVA to release that easement. And as we also said, there was an established site buffer. A portion of that is protected in the deed. Certainly we have no plans to interfere with that or change that part of it. There are some sinkhole areas on this up next to Veterans, and then there's some wooded areas there to the south side as you look at the cloister, one on the MTE property and one just off of the Middle Tennessee property. And those large forested areas obviously would remain open there. This also serves as a downstream drainage way for some of the area of the Burgess Farm, Highway 96, Royal Glen, and when that system misbehaves, which it does from time to time, it actually crosses under Veterans Parkway through the western portion of this site and into the Berkshire subdivision into a drainage system that was constructed to receive it. We'll have to pay attention to that, honor that, and design any improvements that we have around that. And then to the east, of course, we have Overall Creek and its associated floodplain and floodway. And those influence, the land planning and development planning for this property. We did host the community meeting last week, and again, about 45 to 50 residents were there. Where we're at today, and with the time frame and closing of the real estate deal that was contemplated in the land swap, we really anticipate starting some intense planning activities for the full property, not just for a park element or any particular element, but we need to be wise in considering our extension of utilities and access into this. We only want it to do it one time, and we want to extend them to the extent that we can based on a predicted land use plan. And so I anticipate that later this fall or at the first of the year, we'll bring back a proposal to our city council to move forward with some master planning activities that would allow us to more fully engage this site and then determine how it might best be developed for the various uses we've talked about. And again, just a reminder of the existing conceptual master plan that's in effect today, and a conversation that I personally had with representatives from Middle Tennessee Electric about the timing of this rezoning. And currently they have this entitlement, and if we go through second reading, they lose that entitlement, and we can't just turn back the hands of time and reestablish that just by saying, oh, well, we didn't close on the land. Once we go to an effective rezoning date after city council acts, then this entitlement is lost and would have to be regained through a rezoning process. And so we felt it was important that they understood that and that we understood that, and that you understand that the timing on this is such that today Middle Tennessee Electric has a vested right in this, and they're not interested in giving up that right until we confirm for both parties that we're ready to close on the real estate deal. And so if this moves forward with a positive recommendation of the mayor and council, and they move forward with it, we would anticipate the effective date of this being very closely scheduled with the timing of the closing on the real estate. And so as we looked at it at city staff level and heard from various parties about its interest here, including city staff, city administration, we then took a concept plan individually to our mayor and council, got some feedback from them. This then became sort of the working model for what I'd call the preliminary land use plan. And so you do see 92 acres of park in here, and obviously that's park and open space and drainage and a good portion of the TVA easement. Not all of that is likely to be developed as park because of some limitations on the property, but certainly it would be zone park, and those protections and buffering that would be there for the park would help the other uses. We have identified about 30 acres again in the center of the site, which matches up closely with the MTE plan for their most intense corporate activities that they had proposed there with the corporate office and their operations, their Rutherford County Operations Center. Adjacent to Veterans Parkway, then we saw a need there for uses that did not naturally fit in a park setting, and those being public facilities. We have talked specifically about a future fire station, a potential future west police precinct, possible neighborhood library, technology center, workforce development and training, and then other community facilities that might really supplement and complement the uses on this property. We're not looking to turn that into a commercial strip center that we would sell to the highest and best use, but really wanted the zoning entitlements there to allow us to execute and move forward with those public facility plans. And so that land use plan turned into this zoning request, and so tonight we're asking that you rezone, as was read in the caption, to these various zoning districts, from planned commercial development to the current, which is the current entitlement, to park, commercial fringe, commercial highway with a gateway design overlay 1 designation. And that's all I have for a presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions, as would Marina or other staff members, before or after the public hearing.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Huddleston. We'll open the public hearing.
Thank you.
Ask if anybody would like to come forward and speak on this item. Okay. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Ask for comments, questions, and/or motions from the Planning Commission.
If there are no questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all very much. Next, we have a mandatory referral and right-of-way abandonment to consider the abandonment of the rights-of-way of Marietta Street and Ruth Avenue. Joe Swanson Jr. is the applicant. Ms. Smith?
Good evening, Planning Commission. Just trying to get some other work done upstairs while your other meetings were going on, so excuse me for it's my turn. So this particular project, you may recall you had a plat map in this particular area last few meetings ago that was involved with this blue parcel and this green outline parcel shown on the screen there that would actually consolidate some of the existing portion of the green lot with the blue lot, and then move some of these lines in this direction, consolidate this lot. And there was a staff comment that prior to a mandatory referral being reviewed, that this area in red would be dedicated as part of the re-subdivision plat of that, should a mandatory referral not be given. At the direction of staff suggested that the applicant file for us looking at a mandatory referral for both of these areas. If you've been out here on Old Salem Road, this is actually shown in our 2040 MTP as a 3-lane road expansion at some point in time. And then Ruth Avenue actually connects to Park Avenue, which does not show any kinds of improvements in our 2040 plan. So we went out and we looked at the various types of potential in those areas, and we did have existing Middle Tennessee Electric power lines, water lines, Comcast lines on the existing above ground facilities, and there's currently a partial water easement in some of that location. It may sound like a lot, but in looking at the area, the biggest thing that we've heard from our engineering department is that these areas do not really serve a city purpose. All of the access for vehicular could be carried out via access easements. So meaning that instead of a public right-of-way, it would be potentially a private access way. So everyone still could have the same access points, but currently the road is probably gravel. In some cases, it's maybe 12 feet in width, has not been maintained in any shape or form over the period of time. And we believe because of this consolidation of this particular one here, this was the only one that was actually landlocked, did not have a public right-of-way that it was attached to. That kind of gave us the opportunity to look at some of those things. Most of this subdivision was filed back in 1928. Had a lot of very, very small and skinny lots, so about 3 or 4 streets have actually been consolidated within this kind of superstructure of the center of the project site. But in looking at those particular things, the applicant has asked, should the requested right-of-ways be abandoned, that they would be transferred to him. However, it's not yet been determined how the right-of-ways would be disposed of should the abandonment be approved by Planning Commission and City Council. However, in looking at the abandonment potential, we would recommend these 6 conditions of approval. One being that a public access and public utility easement would be retained on the entirety of Marietta and Ruth. We would, the rights of way, that the applicant would prepare and submit any legal descriptions and exhibits necessary for the city to file, legal department to file the necessary quitclaim deed documents. The applicant would be responsible for recording the legal instrument and paying of recording fees. Any of the abandoned right-of-ways should be combined with contiguous property via a duly approved subdivision map, which is how we normally consolidate those after an abandonment. And then the abandonment and subsequent disposition of the right-of-way shall not create any non-conforming lots of record by decreasing the amount of required road frontage on any adjacent property below what's required in our zoning ordinance. And lastly, that any portion of the subject right-of-way adjacent to Old Salem Road and Park Avenue deemed necessary by the city engineer for future impacts or improvements be retained. And I did forget to mention that. So as we mentioned, there's a 3-lane approval or future roadway. So we want to make sure that whatever abandonment area is here, when we get into the very specific details, that we don't abandon too much if we need, let's say, 5 feet additional right-of-way or 10 feet to accommodate those future lane configurations. So we would work very closely with engineering to make sure that is also incorporated. And with that, we have been meeting with legal, Matthew, Greg, and engineering and our water sewer department to make sure that all of those interests were taken a look at, and we believe with those conditions that it would make sense to go forward with those abandonments. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
And I think it might be helpful if Cable could put up the aerial photo on my computer. If you're familiar with Mayo's Paint and Decorating Store at the corner of Park and Old Salem, Marietta and Ruth kind of frame the rear and side of that lot that Mayo's Paint and Decorating Store is. It's a very, very substandard road. I think a good two substandard roads, as Ms. Smith mentioned. I think portions of them are even have a gravel travel surface, and so many might not even realize that they're public streets presently. So, but anyway, I thought the aerial photo might give you a little bit of context as to location.
Thank you. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Smith. We'll open the public hearing. Ask if there's anybody that would like to speak on this item.
So much fun, I felt like I needed to join. I'm Brandon Valich. I'm one of the owners of 800 Park Avenue. Entity is Hanu LLC. Just have a question because I don't really understand, so forgive my ignorance. But help me understand as an owner, because we actually border 800 Park or Park Avenue and Ruth. There's a small segment of the building that I think Swanson built in the past that's simply a garage area, more of a storage unit. How does that affect a building that still technically has tenants coming? I totally agree, it's all gravel, and it's actually in very much disrepair. So it's been a question that we've had, because there's also a small segment of land right on the Ruth Avenue side that is technically residential still. Might have some commercial appeal. I think it's a piece of land that somebody's held for a long time. So just as a question, how does that affect us? Does it mean that there is no access moving forward? Does that mean that that side becomes owned by the other landowners? Or does that mean that Swanson takes it with the other property? Only other thing I thought I'd mention, there was the empty space of land connected to, what's the side street? Is it Marietta? Is that the name of it?
Ruth and Marietta.
Ruth Marietta. Behind Marietta, there was a entity that was like a recycling firm that they were renting that land for a time for processing parts. They've since moved. Now, they rented a small storage unit from us, and they actually rented the rest of the land from Swanson for a time. So that could be why this is happening, which is great. I think at some level it's probably going to be a good thing, but I'm just trying to understand how it affects us. So.
Okay, and so your Hanu LLC owns the Mayo?
We own 800 Park Avenue.
Oh, 800.
And if we could put up the...
you put the plat back up, I can point it out. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So it's the building with the kind of L shape to the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's that building. So it doesn't have a strong claim, but it actually does touch Ruth Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions we had all along was the easement already, because the property line is right on what's considered Ruth Avenue. So It's more of a question of how does that affect us or the other owners? That's why I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and see if we can answer the questions.
And I'm glad he pointed that out. I did forget to mention, but let me see if I can scroll down. So, Ruth Avenue. So this is a little bit upside down on my screen. So this is 800 Park Avenue. So there is currently asphalt in the back of this section of the project. And in this area, there's kind of roll-up doors. So the way that an access easement would work is it would be a joint access easement, so anyone can traverse over the old Murrieta or Ruth to get to this back easement area. And I believe currently I saw a map that showed a 20-foot water easement in this location, and it also stated that no building could occur between the two buildings. So it gets a little bit complicated there, so that's why, one of the reasons why we stated if we have an access easement in this section of Murrieta, that would then connect to the adjacent property owner, and then they could continue to traverse behind the backs of their building. It also does look like there's maybe a trash container in this location that is picked up on a regular basis. I couldn't tell if 800 Park also had one that may also pick up from, again, the back area, hence the reason keeping a permanent access easement. So it would work very similar to what we have in a lot of our shopping centers, where we have a cross-access easement that's for the benefit of all the adjacent property owners to use that. Now on Murrieta, and there is one other parcel here, I think he mentioned, on the front of that property. We've actually been asked by multiple people what could be done with that property because it's industrial. It has a 42-foot setback from the front, which 800 Park Avenue doesn't even meet. And people are actually at Park Avenue parked here, and they back up into Park Avenue based on the existing conditions. So there's basically only about 5 foot by 5 foot area that would even be buildable with all of our setbacks for that particular parcel. But we do believe there was a house there at one point in time. And then last thing to mention is along Old Salem, there is an existing house you may have seen in Mr. Blomley's aerial, and several more. I think that's 3 houses, maybe 4, that are all legal non-conforming uses, which means if they were ever damaged or demolished, they could not be rebuilt as a residential structure because it's all zoned heavy industrial. So hopefully that answers the question for rear access easements.
One additional point I would like to make is that the abandonment of this right-of-way would, and basically a public street that has not been constructed as a public street or maintained as a public street. I think what the abandonment will do is it will turn it over into private hands, whether that's Swanson Development or potentially the other adjacent property owners. But I think that for example, if Swanson Development were to assume ownership of the right-of-way, then there is a good chance that we would see improvements to that access, and it's essentially serving as a private access for their property now, and as well as for some of the other properties, and it would continue to be a private access, except it actually would not be owned by the city. It would be owned by the individuals, and I think there would be a good chance that access would be improved if it's under private hands.
But we are saying that if we approve this, that Swanson is the one responsible for maintaining this?
No, so Swanson is requesting that the right-of-way be transferred to them. However, There are other adjacent property owners that can lay claim to that. How we dispose of that right-of-way at this point, we don't know. What's before us tonight is this appropriate to abandon the right-of-way? We're not, the Planning Commission is not acting on how to dispose of the right-of-way, but rather whether to abandon the right-of-way, whether it serves a public purpose or not. And if it doesn't serve a public purpose, then how do we abandon it, and what must it be done to effect its abandonment, accepting how to dispose of it. So that's really the question before you tonight. And if you recommend approval of this to the City Council, then in the interim between when you make your motion tonight and when it goes to City Council, the Planning Department and the Legal Department will continue working with Swanson Development to determine how this right-of-way gets disposed of.
But do you have to work with all anybody that has access to it?
I mean, shouldn't it be
I
split
mean, we
up?
don't want to cut off any, is it?
And the normal rule is that the right-of-way is divided down the middle and goes to the property owner on each side. That doesn't always have to be the case, but that's the starting point and that's the normal rule. But again, the question tonight is whether or not this needs to remain a public street and a public right-of-way. And if Planning Commission recommends that it is suitable for abandonment, we'll work out those details over the next few weeks or months. But as the condition asked for, if it is abandoned, and if it ends up in Mr. Swanson's hands, that there is an access easement remaining for the people at 800 and at 710 Park Avenue. So nobody's access would be cut off. And mechanically how that all happens is to be determined. But again,
that's
the
one of
question,
these 6
looking at these two
conditions.
streets, so-called, is there a need to retain these as public right-of-way? Engineering department would probably much prefer that they not be, because someone's likely to be asking them to fix the street before long if they stay public right-of-way. No one's access will be cut off. And we would not be able to wouldn't be able to do that if Joe wanted to. If Mr. Swanson wanted to do that, he would not be able to cut off those access rights. Now, he may be able to buy access rights from someone. Don't know. Well, we aren't at that. We aren't there yet. But this is kind of the starting point, and the question is, looking at this, are these necessary public streets and public rights of way?
And Middle Tennessee Electric is asking for a 40-foot easement, which basically fulfills the entirety of Murrietta's width.
I think what we have determined in the course of our study of this is that this serves no purpose that can't be handled via easements as opposed to public right-of-way. The utilities that are in there can be contained within easements. The access can be contained to the other properties can be contained within easements. And so that's what we do when we get one of these requests. We study it to determine whether or not, in staff's opinion and in the opinion of the various departments and utilities that we work with, whether or not it needs to be retained as a public right-of-way. And I think our findings are that, based on the opinions of those entities, that it does not.
Okay. Any other questions?
I mean, I don't have a question. I agree with what we're trying to do. I'm not an attorney. You know, I want to try to assure the gentleman that got up and spoke that he's going to continue to have, I know you said it 3 times and it's a condition of approval. It just doesn't sound right to me, but as long as he's going to continue to have the right to access it, that's fine. And it would just worry me if I had no control over my own access to the rear of my building, that would worry me.
I would understand, and Mr. Halpern, I would say that this is the first step for a decision of whether or not this needs to remain public right-of-way. Your action tonight will not abandon this as public right-of-way. There are several steps to be taken, and it may end up that we can't do it. It may end up that it can't get done, and these remain just like they are. that's a real possibility.
And it's our intent not to take it to excuse me, to city council until the issue of how to dispose of the right-of-way is worked out.
Right, all of that will be worked out before it goes to council, or it won't go to council. But we can't begin those other steps and work toward that if we don't have,
Unless we
without this step.
decide it doesn't need to be a public right-of-way. Got our council to follow up on that. You comfortable with that?
Yes, I just hope that he has a opportunity to be part of the communication. I mean, I don't know this gentleman from Adam, but, yeah.
If that's the case, I move for approval.
Yeah.
Second.
Subject to all staff comments.
Subject to all staff comments.
Motion and second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I believe that concludes our public hearings tonight. We have staff reports and other business. A few more mandatory referrals. First one is a mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of a sanitary sewer easement located on property at 901 County Farm Road. Huddleston Steel Engineering, on behalf of Rutherford County Community Care, is the applicant. Mr. Aguilera, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Jones and members of the Planning Commission, especially staying this late. I'm grateful to the powers that be that made this agenda that my item gets to go first and that public order is maintained in this council chamber tonight. So this mandatory referral request is to abandon an existing sanitary sewer easement. This is from Enoch Joel of Huddleston Steel Engineering on behalf of Community Care of Rutherford County. The easement in question is located on the northeastern portion of the property at 901 County Farm Road, north of East County Farm Road and east of the CX Road railroad tracks. And I pulled up the exhibit as well just so we could look at this. In this mandatory referral, the Planning Commission is being asked to consider the abandonment of an existing sanitary sewer easement located on the Community Care Rutherford County site. The abandonment has been requested due to the fact that the sewer line contained in the easement previously served in a portion of a building on the site that had been raised back in 2013. Murfreesboro Water Resources has researched this request and concurs that the sewer line itself has already been abandoned and the easement is no longer necessary. On August 30th, this request went before the Murfreesboro Water Resources Board, where it was recommended upon the board that it was recommended approval that the easement be abandoned. The Planning Department's Project Engineer and Legal Department has also reviewed this request. It concurs the same findings that the abandonment is acceptable and that the easement appears to be surplus. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of this request to the City Council subject to the following conditions. One, that if approved by City Council, the applicant will be responsible for providing the information necessary, including but not limited to any exhibits and legal descriptions for the legal department to prepare legal instruments to formally abandon the easement, and that the legal instruments will be subject to the final review and approval of the legal department. And second, that the applicant will be responsible for recording these instruments, including payment of the recording fee. And again, I'll leave the exhibit up here so you can review on site where it is at. And I am here for any questions if you have any.
Okay. Any questions?
There are no questions. I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Aguilera. Next, we have a mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of a drainage easement located on property at 3241 Pheasant Run Trail, Huddleston Steel Engineering, on behalf of Reggie Nelson, applicant.
I'll go ahead and take that one, Madam Chair. So we have a request to abandon the drainage easement located at the rear of the residential lot at 3241 Pheasant Run Trail. Here's Ms. Smith. She'll go ahead and take this.
Sorry, I was just trying to make sure I've got the contact information for the gentleman that spoke for the last item. So this particular item seems like a little bit of an odd request. As you can see it here in this drawing here on the screen, it's in the middle of a subdivision, and there is a 20-foot drainage easement that comes all the way down the backside of the property. They reached out to our engineering division as they liked to see about potential of abandoning this area. And our understanding from both engineering and then provided in a letter that was certified by the engineer is that there are no drainage facilities in this particular area. And actually, this is a contour line here that's being shown at this section, and my understanding is this is kind of at the top of the grade. So there are no facilities that are flowing from this part of it towards this particular house, because literally the drainage would go from this point down and this point down. So what they are proposing is to abandon their 20-foot drainage easement along the backside of the property. Our city engineering division, you can kind of see it a little bit better on this one, but this is actually not the right side up. It's actually reversed from the other picture that you saw. But this would be that 20-foot drainage easement. And the only recommendations our engineering department had is really the three that are shown there, that the applicant provide the necessary legal department documents for any legal descriptions and exhibits to prepare and record. Drainage easement abandonment should be subject to a final approval by, again, legal department, and the applicant would be responsible for paying and any recording fees.
So is it, I mean, so what about lot 71 and the drainage easement on the back of their lot?
So the drainage from there, they're saying all flows this direction away from this particular project. So imagine that this is on the high point of the site, so nothing flows to it because everything's flowing down from it.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense. Yep, when I see a line that just connects, I'm just like, that doesn't make sense. But in talking to the engineers and folks that understand that, they believe that this is not a needed portion of that, and the intent, I believe, of the applicant is to install a pool in this location.
I figured that was probably
Yes, it has its own drainage. No, just kidding.
Gate the drainage to come down.
Good.
okay. Any other questions?
If there are no questions, I move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you, Commission.
thank you. Next, we have the Haynes family amended master plan for 4 lots on 4.5 acres, zoned commercial highway located along Memorial Boulevard, Track West Partners developer. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see Mr. Aguilera in the audience, so I would say that I'm gravely offended that he has skipped out on my presentation. Thank you. Thank you. This is a pretty simple request. It was something that we told the developers and the engineering team that we would go ahead and put it on the evening meeting. A master plan was approved in 2020 or 2021 for the latest version of the Haynes family property subdivision located along the west side of Memorial Boulevard. Those of you who are on the north side of town know the Aldi and the Park apartments that are built there. We've seen site plans. I think all 4 of them have probably been approved administratively because they qualified for administrative approval for a Wendy's, a Valvoline oil change, a Slim Chickens, and a Dutch Brothers coffee for these 4 lots. That plat was approved several years ago by the Planning Commission and was recorded in July. There were joint access easements at the rear of those 4 lots, one for Slim Chickens and Dutch Brothers. You'll see kind of a rectangular box at the rear of lots 5 and 6. And there was also a shared access easement to the backage road that currently runs behind Aldi, where lots 3 and 4 come together along the rear. Since that time, site plans have been submitted for review and approval for Wendy's and Valvoline and have been approved administratively. Both Wendy's and Valvoline wish to have their own driveway onto that backage road. Our engineering staff has evaluated putting 2 driveways, one for each lot there instead of the one shared driveway. And because of the low volume of that backage road is anticipated to have, they don't see any issue with that. But because this was part of an approved master plan that showed that as an access point onto that backage road, a shared access point, we needed to first bring to you an amended master plan to remove that shared access point at the rear of lots 3 and 4 in order to allow Wendy's and Valvoline to each have their own separate driveways onto that backage road. I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding this item.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Blomley?
There are none. I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. What looks to be our last item tonight, the Haynes family lots 3 through 6, amended final plat for 4 lots on 4.5 acres, zoned CH, located along Memorial Boulevard, Track West Partners developer. Mr. Blomley.
I could go over all the history again, or I could just say we would recommend approval of this amended final plat, subject to all staff comments. Basically, it just removes that shared access easement in the rear, and MTE has also requested a electric easement along the front as well. So,
Motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
couldn't have said it better myself.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Now, any other staff reports or business tonight?
I have nothing.
Thought I saw somebody jumping up over there. Like, wow.
I told you I was hungry.
Not, we stand adjourned.